Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Redwood City School District Board Meeting. Bienvenidos a todos y gracias por estar esta noche en otra junta del distrito de Redwood City. If you need translation, we have translations. Si requiere interpretación al español, por favor llame al 978-990-5137 y presione 8377041 y el signo de número. Speaking at the board meeting, public is encouraged to speak to the board on issues of concern, whether or not the issues are on the agenda. To address the board, please complete a speaker's card if you are in person. And if you are online, please, or we hope that you did submit your Google Doc 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. The public comments are limited to 3 minutes, but depending on the number of speaker cards, we may need to reduce that time. After your 3 minutes are up, you will be turned off. Are there any addition? That's right. I'm sorry. Okay.
Trustee McAvoy. Present. Trustee Wells.
Here.
Trustee Lawson.
Here.
Vice President Marquez.
Here.
President Diaz-Slocum.
.2 report on closed session. We received information from our consultants and no decisions were made. So again, welcome everyone to the Redwood City School District meeting tonight. Bienvenidos a todos a otra junta del distrito de Redwood City. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, so
this hybrid stuff we're still learning how to do. Okay, so changes to the agenda. I would like to move up. Well, first of all, I'm wondering if we can move 13.1 to 13.6 to consent. So those are all the second readings, unless we have any comments from the public or if the board members had any other.
Wendy, is this the one that has a change that you brought back? One of them has a. Okay.
Which one was that? Oh, anyway, yeah, I can pull that one, leave it on action if you'd like. Okay, so I'd like to move, we just have a very long agenda, so I'm just concerned. We already have covered those. Okay, so 13.1 to 13.6, we'd move to consent. And then I'm wondering if we can move the bond program consent items, so number 10, as well as number 12, which would be all the consent items that I just mentioned. So the ones that got moved, move those up to, I guess after number 7, after we approve the agenda.
Can we move 11 also?
Yes, and then what I'd like to do is separate, so those are the consent items, and then move 11 as well. Yeah, I guess I could just say them all together, sure.
So 10,
11 and 12
11.
would all move.
Yeah.
And then we also move 13.1 to 13.6 to 12. So as long as there's no public comments on any of those consent items that I moved, I think we're okay. Okay, great. So I'd like to move those to after 7.1, if that's okay with everybody.
So you're moving all of 10, all of 11, all of 12, and 13.1 to 13.6.
Mm-hmm. Go under the consent, yeah. That way, if anybody's waiting for those agenda items in the audience, they don't have to wait. Our staff can also not have to wait.
So
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
Roll call, please, Ellie.
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
trustee Wells,
Aye.
trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marcus,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye. Do we have any oral communication?
So,
No,
Cecilia, number 11, we'll have to do a, action required, the bond program action item.
Okay,
And if there's no questions, I will like, wait. We still have to approve, oh, you're right, sorry.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
right.
So we're on the ones we just missed. So
Okay.
Start with 10, sorry. I'll make a motion to approve the bond program consent item. I'll make a motion to approve the bond program consent items, number 10.
I'll second that.
roll call, Ellie, please.
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
trustee Wells,
Aye.
trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marcus,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye.
Now we're on to.
So can I get a motion to approve the recommendation adoption of resolution 39, resolution of intent to convey a public utility easement to PG&E and calling a public hearing in connection therewith?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
trustee Wells,
Aye.
trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marcus,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye. Okay, and can I get a motion to approve the consent items 12.1 through 12.7? As well as 13. Action items 13.1 through 13.6.
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
trustee Wells, trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marcus,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye.
So oral communications, but the oral communications that we have at this point in time are for item 9.2. So we're on 9.1.
So the oral communication we have is for item 9.2. So on to item 9.1, presentation and discussion on the general obligation bond, next steps.
So at this point in time, we have our consultants with us that will give us an overview of the GO bonds that we're hoping to go for in November. And at this time, it's an opportunity for each of you to ask any questions that you may have, and then we can entertain a discussion. So Blake.
Everybody.
Does he have did you press on the right? There you go.
Good evening, everybody. Do we have some of our other bond team members virtually?
We do have Joy as well.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I see Joy.
Hello, good evening. I believe also Meredith is with us.
Yes, Meredith is with us.
Good evening.
Perfect.
And-
Joy, do you want to kick things off or?
Sure, I would be happy to. Thank you, board members, superintendent, members of the public. We are here tonight working with the district team on talking about the next steps for a potential November 22 GO bond. So today we hope to walk through a little bit of a review of the need. Also talk a little bit about the voter survey that was conducted. Blake is there in person to talk about the bond program structure. Meredith will cover the resolution, and then I'll come back at the end to do the timeline. I believe these first few slides were going to be done by Dawn.
Joy, at this point in time, he's not home yet. He's almost there. So
Oh, okay. Well, I'm
let's-
happy to speak to him, or we can jump somewhere else if that makes sense.
So why don't you go ahead and start? And then if he comes in, I will let you know. How's that?
Okay, that sounds great. So Don had put together a few updates, just talking a little bit about Measure T and some of the projects that had been completed. Obviously, he is the expert and can speak in far more details about all of these. These are probably many things that you have seen presented in the past. Some of those top items that were completed by Measure T, renovating aging classrooms and science labs, updating the school libraries, classroom computers, and the instructional technology at all the schools, fixing and replacing these roofs, the portable buildings, and improving school fire and earthquake safety, as well as plumbing, ventilation, and then providing some classrooms dedicated for music, art, and performing arts electives. And I think the next slide here has some photos that show some of the work that was completed. So far completed is 193 million in site updates and repairs, really completing that promise that the board had made when Measure T was passed to do a lot of work at those schools. The next bullet really focuses on the technology and network upgrades that were completed at all the sites. Fiber, data, wireless access points, servers, lots of really nice upgrades for teachers and students in the classroom. And then some general site modernizations there with the second bullet, including upgrades to utilities, exterior lighting controls, restrooms, flooring, cabinets, furniture. So really things that you could see and visualize when you're right there in the classroom with the students, and improvements that we see right here in these pictures. In fact, classrooms look beautiful.
Actually, this is a library at Taft.
Oh, this
and
is the library.
This is the new library at Taft that was just opened a couple weeks ago. And then you see the new structure of the two-story structure there that not only has the offices, but it has some classrooms in it also.
Oh, very nice. So phase two, I think this is important to note, because when the district did the facilities master planning and was looking at needs, they always knew that there was, over 400 million of identified needs. In fact, there's 400 million still remaining. When Measure T was passed, it was well recognized that it was the first phase of repairs and updates that were needed at the schools. That first phase really focused on the priorities and items that the board was thoughtful about as you, move through the Measure T bond program. Total identified priority improvements and repairs for phase two right now is sitting at, so these are the next needs for just phase two is 241. Oh, and he's got a great breakdown here. So this appears to go through each school site for the board and really break down some of these needs by each school site and for the community as well, so that you can see some things that are still needed to be done at each school. So maybe we can slowly go through a couple of the slides, and John, if there are some important things to point out, perhaps.
Sure.
And I apologize not being as familiar with all these school sites. It's hard for me to really speak to these, but I do think that, as we have seen recently, school safety and security still seems to be a big, important part of this process. Adding more classrooms, updating libraries, science labs, outdoor learning spaces. These all still tend to be things that are needed and are listed in these totals here.
Joy, maybe I'll just take a second to say that in the first phase, there were several schools that really didn't have many upgrades either. Those were all sent to phase two. So they did get like the safety upgrades and like the
The fences, they got the fences. the
fencing
door
and like some of the
locks.
technology
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
but that was it. And maybe
Yeah.
shade area too. But as far as the buildings go and new construction, there are some schools that didn't see that at all in phase one.
Yes. And this is a very common situation that is facing many school districts, is that there is a lot of needs because schools were older, many of them built over 50 and 60 years ago. And really, to meet today's technology and learning, new ways of learning for students, there needs to be a lot of updates at schools. So many school districts now look every 10 or so years and realizing that they have to complete bonds and complete repairs to schools and updates over a couple different periods or a couple different phases. So phasing now is becoming very, very common and actually the norm for most school districts. So taking a look at an overview of the polling, so switching to something I'm a little bit more expert on, is I wanted to just remind everybody of where we were when we started this process and looking at the polling for whether a bond was possible for this November. The results showed that voters are very favorable of the school district. There is still a high percentage that just didn't really know a lot. And that's, pretty common as well, because a lot of times people in a community and registered voters aren't necessarily the exact same as your parents. And your parents, in fact, only make up about 20% of the voters in the district. That said, over 60% of the voters agreed that the district had a need for additional funding. And we often find that when voters understand that there is a need, that goes hand in hand with being supportive of funding and providing opportunities for districts. So initial support for a bond measure, this is when people heard the ballot question with nothing else, with that no information about the need facing the schools. That initial support was at 62%. A GEO bond only requires 55% support, so 62 was strong. All of the potential projects that were mentioned in the survey were very high. They all showed support close to or over 60%. In fact, there were really only a few that were below 70%, many of them in that high range. So there was a definite appetite in the community for the types of projects that you need to have done at each of the schools. And then just finally, at the end of the survey, after hearing more about the costs and the types of programs, support continued to grow. And we really ended up at the end of our survey right at 63%. So again, a very strong showing that people understand the need and that they are willing to step up and support the school district. So that's the overview of the polling. I will turn it over now back to Blake there, and he can talk a little bit about the financing.
Thanks, Joy. And I'm glad in the early part of this presentation, it came up as a recap of Measure T and the thought of a phased approach. Having been involved in the facilities master planning process that went on in, I think it was the 2013-2014 school year, it was very involved, very collaborative, and the recognition of need throughout the district sites was quite vast. And so there was never a conscious decision that the district made to cap the bond and only address certain projects through Measure T. It was really through the focus that a bond is capped at a certain tax rate, and there are limitations on how far you can actually reach in accessing voter authorization. And at the time, the district in 2015 went out for a bond measure, Measure T, at the highest statutory tax rate it could go out for, $30 per 100,000, which at the time generated 193 million. And through the course of that implementation process, the district has done a phenomenal job reaching as many sites and as many priority needs as it could through that first, quote unquote, phase of the bond program. As mentioned earlier, there was always recognition that there were needs beyond Measure T. And so I'll talk a little bit about what the preliminary look of sizing a new measure could look like some of the assumptions that go into sizing that measure in a very similar fashion as we approach the Measure T program. So on this first slide is just a recap of the district's bond program as a whole, looking back really over the last 25 years. I can say with confidence, Redwood City School District has been very modest in its outreach to voters in requesting approval of bond authorization. You can see that in two, I would say, smaller measures going back to the 97 and 2002. Measure T really was the first district-wide large bond authorization that the district has gone out for to try and address district-wide needs. As a result of kind of the modest outreach through bond authorizations over those years, the amount outstanding of debt is well below the median for California school districts of this size. And I'll show you that on the next slide here. At this point, all of these three authorizations have fully exhausted what voters approved. And so outside of looking at some small pots of money for grants or maybe some other readily available monies on hand, which is not going to stretch very far, a new GO bond measure is going to be the driver for most of the capital facility improvements looking forward. On the next slide, it does tie into some of the comments that I made early on about the modesty for which the district has engaged with voters to help support capital improvements within the district. You can see Redwood City School District as a combined tax rate with the feeding into Sequoia Union High School District is on the lower tier of where countywide tax rates are among all school districts. And again, that all ties back into those existing bond authorizations on hand and what the county is having to levy for in order to accommodate the repayment of bonds that were sold from each of those respective measures. So as you can see here, in the current year, the district's tax rate for just Redwood City is at 34.60, and then combined with Sequoia, the combined tax rate for school district measures is $63.60. Whereas the highest is upwards of $125, and the very lowest for San Francisco Unified, a single district, is at $35. Looking at the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about what a new bond authorization could look like in terms of size and certain assumptions associated with it. When we develop our bond financing scenarios, and K&N acting as the district's municipal advisor goes through iterations, works closely with district staff to see how it aligns with the capital facility project needs. But ultimately, we're proposing conservative assumptions, meaning that whatever commitments are made to voters, the assumptions that we use, we want to make sure are aligned with being able to fulfill those commitments. And part of that is assessed valuation growth. As we're structuring bonds to be sold, we're assuming that the valuation within the district relative to the debt outstanding is going to be within a certain tax rate. And that tax rate is what voters actually approve. And so AV growth within Redwood City School District has grown phenomenally, exceptionally high, with all of the activity that's gone on, with the demand for housing and land. Over the last 10 years has been on average 7.44%. For purposes of sizing a new bond scenario, we estimate a 3.5% annual AV growth, meaning that we know there's going to be economic cycles in future years. There's going to be strong AV growth, and in some years it might be lower than average. But what we don't want to do is assume a higher AV growth over the course of the future bond program that doesn't materialize. What will happen as a result is a tax rate that won't align itself with what voters approve. And so Measure T was approached the same way. And as a result, the tax rate for Measure T has stayed within the $30 commitment, actually below the $30 commitment that voters authorized back in 2015. As I mentioned, another important assumption is the tax rate that voters will be asked to approve if going out for a new bond. And so it can go all the way from $1 upwards of the $30 per 100,000, which is the statutory limit for a non-unified school district in California per education code and legislation. So we ran a couple scenarios at the table at the bottom, just giving a range between $20 and $30 and recognizing the need. That was the driver for the range of those tax rate scenarios. We knew that there was a certain critical mass of bonds that would need to align with the need. And so based on engagement with district staff, these scenarios were the most fitting to present to the board as examples for purposes of this conversation. And you can see this table at the bottom looks at the upper end $30 per 100,000 tax rate, the upper end limit. The bond authorization from a new measure could be upwards of 380 million. On the lower end of this range that we've provided $20, it's about 250 million. And then highlighted in green is really a scenario that has garnered most of the attention in the preliminary planning stages, which is the $24 tax rate scenario, generating about $298 million of bond authorization. And the reason that that's garnered most of the interest of the bond planning team, district staff included, is that it's able to generate a pretty substantial amount of dollars that could address this capital facility need that's out there, while still modestly placing the district well within that range of school districts countywide. And you can see the actual tax rate that voters would see on their tax bill for the average median assessed value home within the district is going to be roughly about $184.27 per year at that particular scenario of $24. And what I'll get into on the next slide really addresses the last few bullets on this, which is the repayment term, number of issues, and kind of how the implementation of a new bond plays out. Similar to Measure T, when you go out for a larger bond that's going to address district-wide needs, it's not sold all at one time. The bond sales are aligned with the cash flow needs, so you're only borrowing what you can spend within roughly a 3-year period. So on this next page, and the last page that I'll be speaking about, unless to ask questions about others, focuses on the implementation of this $24 tax rate scenario. It's the prior slide. And so this lays out a hypothetical or proposed issuance schedule. Under a $24 tax rate scenario, voters would be asked to approve the $24 tax rate and authorizing $298 million of bonds for capital facility projects. We would anticipate selling roughly 3 different series of bonds every 2 to 3 years. Here it's outlined every 3 years, but again, there's still some flexibility to align with cash flow needs. And the dollar amounts for each of these years, there's to be honest, there's not a ton of magic there either. This is a baseline assumption where there's roughly equal incremental amounts being sold, but depending on when the bulk of the money is needed and going to be spent, these amounts could fluctuate based on that knowledge. So there's still some tweaking left to be done, but the $298 million is going to be associated with that $24 tax rate scenario. And then you could see the other assumptions here. We're talking about doing it as current interest bonds only, meaning that they're paying off the loan and the interest for the loan each year. There's no deferred interest payments, which can be costly. That's some of you may have heard of capital appreciation bonds. That's a financing tool that some school districts have used. It's a little bit more costly. There's not that included in this particular program, and with a maximum repayment term of 30 years. So I think that that's most of the financing detail I wanted to cover. It might be a little bit overkill, but I just wanted to make sure you guys had a good sense of what the dynamics are associated with how each piece links with each other in terms of tax rate, authorization amount, and then some of the other bond components. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Meredith for the next few slides in this presentation.
Great, thank you, Blake. So I would like to talk a little bit about the process and what actually needs to be done if the board decides it does want to pursue placing a general obligation bond measure on the ballot in November. And really, it's consideration and approval of a resolution. The resolution under Prop 39 really consists of 4 parts. So there's the standard text that's the front of the resolution that will include a whole bunch of citations to the education code and the election code, and that part isn't very customized. It's pretty standard for school district Prop 39 bond elections. But then there are 3 appendices to the resolution that are unique to Redwood City School District. So the first appendix is going to be the actual question that voters are voting upon when they decide to authorize the district to issue bonds. There's the full text of the ballot measure, which is the information that will be printed in the sample ballot for voters when they are given information to make a decision on how to vote. And then there's a tax rate statement, which includes information that's kind of a transparency measure so that voters have some understanding of what is the impact of approving the bond measure. Next slide. So the 75-word ballot statement, and it literally is capped at 75 words. We get to use 75 words to ask the voters if they want to approve Redwood City School District issuing general obligation bonds. And usually the 75 words is crafted something like, shall Redwood City School District issue a certain number of bonds, a dollar amount of bonds, in order to, and then a list of projects follows. And it's important to note that in 2018, there was a new law that was enacted that actually, in addition to what I just described, adds 3 more required parts to that 75-word ballot question. So we don't get any more words, but we have to now include the total amount of tax that the county will collect each year on an annual basis, the dollar amount of tax collected, the length of the tax levy. So how long will taxes be levied in order to repay Redwood City School District bonds issued under this bond measure? And then what will the rate of tax be? And that's typically expressed either as cents per $100 of assessed value or as dollars per 100,000 of assessed value. And that's how to express it is a decision that can be made. It's kind of a tactical decision that your team will decide what sounds better. Blake mentioned that there's a tax rate maximum. So for Redwood City School District, the maximum tax rate would be $30 per 100,000. So we would express, he suggested $24 per 100,000. So that actually would show up in that 75-word ballot statement that a voter, when they're standing in the poll or they're sitting on their couch with their mail-in ballot, reads when they check yes or no. So then after the 75-word ballot statement that's attached to the resolution, we would have the full text of the ballot measure. We can move on to the next slide. And the full text typically recites the accountability provisions that are included in Prop 39. As you're familiar, there will be a Citizens Oversight Committee. There's a financial audit and a performance audit of the bond fund that are required to be undertaken on an annual basis. We will recite that we don't intend to use, and we're not allowed, and we know we're not allowed to use any bond proceeds for operating expenses or administrator salaries, and that the board has considered class size and safety measures when it has crafted its ballot measure. And then perhaps the most famous part of the full text of the ballot measure is the project list. And that, you may recall, looks like a list of bullets that describes different facility improvements that the district intends to undertake with the proceeds of its bonds. Next slide. And the project list is important. It's important because every time a new project is done, we need to make sure that that project appears on the project list that was included in this resolution, that this portion of is provided to voters before they decide to vote yes or no. So in other words, the voters get to read this project list when they decide how to vote. So what is it? It's the only real guidance we have as to what it is the California Constitution that says it is a specific list of projects. We don't have very much clarification on what specific means, but the intent is that voters can understand how the bond proceeds will be spent. And specific, we can satisfy specific when we say something like repair or replace leaky roofs, right? We know when someone says I'm going to repair or replace a leaky roof, we know how that money is going to be spent. We don't have to say where we intend to spend the monies, particularly. We don't have to create a project list based on site. Some districts like to do that, but that again is kind of a business decision that what works best for the district, whether the projects are firm enough that that can be done. I think it's a better course of action to leave the projects general and not tell voters that any specific project is being undertaken at any specific site, so that flexibility remains. It's also important to note that any limiting language in the project list, for example, if the project list says that you're going to install steel fencing, if later when it comes time to do the project and steel doesn't seem to work anymore and you decide you want to go a different route with a different material, if the project list said steel fencing, you're stuck with steel fencing and you will only be permitted to install steel fencing. So there needs to be some flexibility and generality in addition to make sure that those projects can be undertaken at the time they're undertaken in the best manner that's efficient and desirable for the district. Next slide. So when it comes time to actually draft this project list, it's important to take into account the current needs of the district and also potential future needs. As you know, the 2015 Measure T proceeds were spent over several years, so that what the district needed to do in 2015 may have changed slightly when it came to 2019 when the last series of bonds was issued. So what we need to do in 2022 may be slightly different in 2025. So allowing that flexibility. Generally, the facilities master plan is a good place to start, but as Joy and Blake both mentioned, voters also have ideas about how they'd like to see proceeds being spent. And when they look at the project list, we want them to like what they see. So we need to balance both the district's needs and the voters' expectations. Because as was mentioned, the voters get to see this and will consider it when they decide to vote yes or no on the bond measure. So the last piece of the resolution is the tax rate statement. And the intention of the tax rate statement is to allow voters to understand what will be the financial impact of their approving the bond measure. And it includes three pieces of information: the average annual tax rate, that is over the life of the bonds being issued and them being outstanding. What is the tax rate on average that will be levied each year? An estimate of the highest tax rate. What is the most taxes that will be levied? And of course, as I mentioned, we're capped at $30 per 100,000 of assessed value. And then a giant number that is an estimate of the total amount that will be required to repay all bonds that are issued under this bond measure. And it's important to note that we don't have a crystal ball, right? We can't tell the future. So these are estimates. The district is not held to these numbers. It's meant to provide information to voters, but we're never going to look back at the tax rate statement and say, uh-oh, we were wrong. We use the best information we have to try to predict what these numbers will be, but these are estimates. So in terms of timing and when does all of this have to happen, the county, there's an 88 days prior to the election being called deadline to turn in the resolution to the county. So that would be August 12th, which means this board has up until August 11th to consider and approve or disapprove such a resolution. So we have about 2 months planning time to make all this happen. If directed, it's always a nice idea to check in with the county elections officer and let them know that this is in the works, because they appreciate a heads up. And we can also ask them if they have any specific requirements for filing a resolution calling an election. I think I'll pass it back to Joy at this point.
Yes, yes. And I did want to mention, I saw Don joined us. So if there are questions from the board, or if he had things he wanted to cover that I had missed from the earlier slides, I think, we had done a pretty good overview, but I just wanted to pause for a moment and see if it would be helpful at all if anyone had any questions about the need that Don could answer. All right. Hearing none, I'll just keep moving forward then with our timeline. Oh, if you could go back to the timeline, please. Thank you. So, you've heard so far about the need that's remaining, the projects that were completed in phase one, how a potential GO bond would look and how it compares with other rates and outstanding bonds in the county, and how we would go about preparing to put a bond on the ballot for November. So I just wanted to go back through our timeline and just finalize with any of these final steps so that everybody understands where we are and where we are going. So it is actually June 15th where we're presenting to everyone just to hear feedback and see if there are any questions. And there is still a possibility to do a tracking survey before the board would have to vote if that were of interest to the board. I know that there are many changes and lots of things have been happening. What we tend to see, though, is that the survey that we completed is, while it was a snapshot in time, it was probably a pretty good look considering when it was completed, because it really was already, we were seeing the stock market go down, and we were seeing inflation, and we were already seeing gas prices go up. So those things were already sort of a part of our survey. So I don't know that we would see any other numbers or changes to our survey, but I just wanted to put out that that was an option. We will be working with the bond team to finalize that draft of the resolution. And on June 29th, the team will be back just for a first reading by the board so that you can have an opportunity to see what that resolution looks like, have a discussion about any questions that you might have about it. And hopefully that'll put us on track to finalize it. We do plan to send a second mailer. We've already sent one, and I'll kind of review that on the next slide. But we are looking to send a second one just to let them know that the board would be moving forward and inviting people who have questions or comments to attend the August 10th board meeting, where the board would adopt that resolution to place the bond measure on the ballot. So still lots of time for outreach. I would like to say a lot of outreach has already been done. I know the district has been doing some communications, and then we also have at least sent one mail. So on the next slide, there we go. So we did put information on the district website. The link there is actually a hyperlink, but you can always go and look and see, we're talking about phase 2, we're talking about the needs. We did send that informational mailer. It recapped phase 1, talked about phase 2, and we asked people to start completing an online survey. I just looked tonight before the meeting started, and we've actually received a few more responses. We're still under 50, but it has actually jumped up to about 40 responses to date. It turns out we're still right in that margin of 57% of respondents being parents so far. It's not uncommon that we might not see a huge response rate. A lot of times people get information, they read through it, and what we tend to see is people who respond are people who have something they want to share with the district, whether it's positive or negative. So far, what we've seen is a lot of positivity. So a few people who had questions or comments, but most of it so far has been very positive. The next slide. So this just is a broad recap of the whole timeline. You've heard about everything that has been done so far. We really are in that orange, yellowish block right there. putting together the ballot measure, working on the project list, the resolution. A reminder to the board that once the board calls for the vote to place the resolution on the November ballot, advocacy efforts are done by a separate independent campaign from the district. The district may provide information and talk about the board taking action, talk about the need, but they cannot ask people to take a position or support the bond measure. And so that's really why it's important that there is that private effort that is currently being worked on separately. So that, I think, is most of our presentation. I do see there's one last slide. It looks like one of Blake's slide. I didn't know if that got snuck or moved.
You know what, that's just an appendix for reference of the district's historical assessed valuation growth relative to
Okay.
that 3.5% assumption. That's part of the assumption of a new bond measure.
Fantastic. So with that, we'll pause here and end our presentation and just ask if there are any questions or any points of clarity that we can provide.
Do you mind if I ask a question? So thank you very much, Joy and Blake and Meredith. Really appreciate the information tonight. I had a question on June 29th then. So in a couple of weeks at our board meeting, we'll see the actual draft project list as it would look like in the bond language. So tonight we saw, I think a more readable sort of list with, here's the sorts of things we're thinking about for each school site. We did get a lot of email comments the last few days asking to add a centralized kitchen. I think per what Meredith said, certainly that's something that we've talked about in terms of upgrading kitchens and that sort of thing. So we just want to be cautious, I think, of how we describe that, right? So we're not locked into a specific design, since I think we still need to have a lot of conversations. But I think that was the one thing that maybe was missing from the list that we saw tonight in the measure, that I know we've just gotten a lot of comments from the community. So I did want to bring that up. And maybe there's some folks who want to speak to that as well. But again, so I guess just my question is, on the 29th, in that first reading, we'll actually see the project list. The community will see the project list. So if there's anything missing from that at that point, that would be the more detailed list in a general format, right? We'd see that.
Yes, and the intention with providing that first reading is that so you have what could potentially be the final version and have a chance to make comments. Precisely. That's right.
Great. So that would be a good place for the community to make comments, for us then to make sure, because then we have the couple of months until the August 10th meeting to basically finalize that list. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. That was my one question.
Can I follow up with after that, Elisa?
Yeah.
The other thing I've been hearing a lot about is safety, and I know Dawn could probably tell us all the safety measures we put in place, but I think that is something that the community is still interested in. So if there are additional projects that we can do to improve safety of our schools, especially given what's happened lately. And then the other one would be climate change and how to do mitigation of some of that, whether it's shade or I know we've done a lot on improving the air and soap dispensers and all that. So I don't know what else we could do, but I would like to add those items as well.
Thank you for walking through all this information for us. It was really clear and easy to follow. When we're thinking about the poll results and using that as our, a factor of going ahead with the bond, how should we think about the high school district also going for a bond measure at the same time? And what is that? How should we think of the results in that context? Because I don't believe that was tested as part of the survey.
That is correct. Neither district tested whether the other district was going out in their surveys. We are also working with the high school district, and they are also considering, as you mentioned, a geo bond. I will say that, if you look back, I was looking at one of the slides that Blake shared, the San Mateo County K-12 tax rates. Jefferson Elementary School District and the high school district, they have a long history of working together. They have had bonds on the ballot at the same time. I'm just using them as one example. There are many examples of elementary school districts and high school districts going out at the same time. And I will say that I don't often see that one is passed and the other one isn't. People tend to support education together, or, it's just not the right time. And what they care about is the need. And as we saw in your survey, people do think that there is a need in the school district. And certainly that's also what we've seen in some of the online responses that we've heard so far. So I just haven't seen a correlation where an elementary and a high school district have gone out at the same time and one fails and one passes. I think it is about telling your own story, being very specific about the need, and just being upfront about that. And I think there's actually some opportunities, maybe even to collaborate on some messaging. Does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, that does. And it sounds like looking at, if we were to go forward with the bond, looking at collaboration would probably be the right approach, just judging from your historical experience.
Yes.
And I was actually just going to say that I do appreciate, again, your team for working diligently with us. And the presentation was very clear. My only question was, I know on slide page 20, Meredith mentioned something about the voters' expectations. Is that the same as what Alyssa was talking about? Was that how we would get their expectations, as based on the survey that they're actually submitting at this point?
We've seen both those online responses, yes, that the district. So oftentimes I find a bond, I'll start here. I find that in a community, there are often things that a district is really, find really important. And then there may be community items that the community finds important. And the surveys, both the scientific survey that was completed by the district, that voter survey, and this survey that is out in the community now, where just anyone can respond, it's just an opportunity to find where those two meet and find those priorities. I have worked in some districts where most of the time it aligns very well. The things that the district need are the same things that the community wants to support, because they understand the need. There are times when there is one or two projects that rise to the top. And I do think that these outreach opportunities are those opportunities to consider whether those would get folded into a bond program or not. I do think in the voter survey, we did actually test a centralized kitchen, for example. Again, all projects tested near or above 60%. So a majority of those registered voters do see that as, at least something they would like to support. It wasn't necessarily in the first tier, but it certainly also was not something that people did not see as important.
Great, thank you.
So just, I want to say thank you to Joy and Meredith and Blake for the presentation. I don't have any questions, having sat through this committee and seen the presentation before. So we've asked all those questions, and I think you've asked some really good ones. So thank you.
We do have some speaker cards, I believe, on this item. So are any of those speakers here? Okay.
So our first speaker is Katerina Schoenbach.
Decide how many minutes, because our board policy is such that it's collective for the whole comments for the whole night. Because we're trying to be cognizant of our community, our staff. Oh. Yeah, I was just saying that I think before we get started with comments, I think the board needs to decide the number of minutes per comment, not only on this item, but on the next item. Because our board policy allows for different either 3, 2, or 1 minute. We've also done 90 seconds before. And the reason that we might deviate from the 3 minutes is because we're being cognizant of time and the desire that the board needs an opportunity to make sure that we discuss and give direction in a timely way. And we want to be cognizant of those people that are here in person, those people that are online, community members, as well as staff. So with that said, Eliana, can you let us know how many total speakers do we have tonight, both in person and online?
So we have a total of 37 speakers cards, and we have 4 speakers in person. 2 of the speakers cards that have been submitted from Michael and Kim Sterling have seized their time to Cameron Hoffman.
Okay.
So that reduces the speakers cards to 35.
So our board policy would suggest that we do 1 minute each. I'm open to providing more time, but if we do 3 minutes times 35, that's getting us pretty late into the night. And so I'd like to either do 1 minute or 90 seconds is my recommendation.
Yeah,
I'm trying to do the math. What does 90 seconds get us?
almost like an hour.
Yeah, it's going to be a good hour of
It'll be a little
comment.
bit more than an hour by the time it's, with the space in between.
And I also just want to say to the community, as you're hearing this, we have gotten so many emails, and actually many of them are multiple pages. So we have heard a lot of comments from the community, and I imagine tonight we'll hear kind of similar themes of the different comments that we've gotten. So just know that just because you don't get your 3 minutes, we read emails that, some of them took me 10 or 15 minutes an email just to read through today. So I'll just let you know that there's a lot, we've gotten a lot of input on both these items. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I'd suggest 90 seconds. I thought that worked well at
Okay.
the last hearing.
It's a little more than a
Yeah,
minute.
it's a
and-
little-
I'm good with 90 seconds.
Okay.
Same here.
All right. So I don't know that we need a formal motion, but I'm happy to make one if we need one.
We should probably have it for the minute.
Yeah,
We
let's
should
just
probably-
do it
yeah.
just in case. So I'd like to make a motion that we allow 90 seconds for each comment tonight per our board policy, giving us the flexibility to deviate from the 3 minutes.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee McAvoy,
Aye.
Trustee Wells,
Aye.
Trustee Lawson,
Aye.
Vice President Marquez,
Aye.
President Diaz-Solcom.
Aye.
Casey, do you want to ask the speaker again so we can definitely make them?
So our first speaker is Katarina Schoenbach.
That would be K or C.
It's with a C. It doesn't look like she's in the meeting.
I don't see.
So our next speaker is Lee Jian. L-E, last name J-I-A-N. Okay, our next speaker is Jessica Shade.
She's raised her hand, so she's at the top. All right.
Hi,
Jessica.
everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to provide comments. I want to voice my support of a new school bond. Our district has so many acute needs when it comes to infrastructure, and this bond will be essential in addressing them. Measure T, as you all know, was really a lifeline for aging classrooms and infrastructure, but so much more is needed, especially given how rapidly our tech needs are changing in a COVID era. And this bond can act as a tool for equity, bring all schools up to the same learning standards. And as chair of the Healthy School Meals Committee, you know I'm going to ask for language for a central kitchen be included in the bill to make sure that our students have access to healthy, high quality food. But that's just one of the many absolutely critical elements of this bond. So thank you so much for putting the time and effort into helping develop this initiative. And I know that the children are going to thank you too once it passes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So do you want to try those others just in case? Who were they? Katerina was one.
Katerina Schoenbach.
No, I don't. Oh, perfect. Oh, she's under Victoria. She has her hand raised. Jesse. Okay. Go ahead, Katerina. Can you unmute yourself, please? Yeah, we can't. Katerina, can you unmute, please? Yes, she can't. All right. Katerina, one more time. Can you unmute? All right, let's go on. And what was the other one?
Lee Gian.
No, I don't see Lee. Lee, if you're online, would you please raise your hand? No. Okay. All right.
So those are all the speaker cards for this particular item.
So now it's discussion of the board and direction that you want to move in.
Yeah, well, Janet and I sit on the committee for this, and I know we've given direction that we'd like to go forward and continue working towards the ballot language, the project list. We have had conversations, and Maria, thank you for bringing up the climate, because we actually did talk about that in our group. It wasn't listed in the items that you saw in the board package tonight, but certainly everything from HVAC systems, climate resiliency, also just climate, assistance like additional solar and things like that, maybe even looking at, anyway, so battery storage, that sort of thing, particularly as we know that we've had some issues with PG&E shutting down our electricity, and then it's hard for us to run schools when that happens. So yeah, all that climate resiliency stuff we would definitely want to look at. So thank you for adding that. But anyway, I think both Janet, the committee would give direction to continue to move forward and bring that ballot language and the project list forward on June 29th.
Yeah, I agree with that direction.
Same here.
Same here, and I'm feeling very confident that, of course, we've already worked with TBW, BH in the past, so I'm on for it too.
Yes, and thank you guys. Your presentation was wonderful.
So then what I hear is for June 29th, you would like to see the draft resolution. Along with that draft resolution, Don, maybe we can go over those different projects that you had listed this evening, but we were really unable to have a discussion regarding them. So at that June 29th meeting, maybe we can do that. And then the other piece that, and I'm glad Don's on right now. In the past, what was done is there were visits to the school sites after we went through the process. We approved the resolution, which this time, this is just a draft, it's first reading, so we will not approve it until the August 10th meeting. But after that, then Don and his team goes to the school sites to look at those lists. And then there is some discussion, maybe add, delete. And Don, I don't know if you can say a few words about that.
Yeah, yes, that is correct. So we did a lot of discussion with the school communities, but it is good to go out and have another discussion with them based on what the facilities master plan says. And we will do that.
Okay, perfect. So draft on June 29th, questions in regarding that draft, seeing about the items that are on that draft, and then the hope is that on August 10th, the final will come before you and you'd move forward. All right, got it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Don and Will, we already approved your items. The items were already approved earlier. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to the team, thank you so much for joining us this evening and giving us the information. Blake.
Thanks for coming in person, Blake. Nice to see you. Good to see you too.
Okay, so on with item 9.2, recommended options to the school board regarding Northstar Academy.
Great, thank you. I think that's the item that everyone is here for tonight. You see our attendees that are listed and along members of the audience. So Jesse, if you could start with a slide presentation. Sure. Now, what I should ask you first is, you would want me to go for the presentation, or would you like to take oral communication?
I would like you to go through the presentation because it might answer a lot of the questions that some people might have.
Okay,
Yeah, I think presentation.
all right. Just wanted to make sure. All right, I will get started. So first of all, I want to thank everyone who is in the audience tonight, and also everyone who submitted their emails with their comments, questions, and concerns. As of 5 o'clock, I had 33 that I had read, and I know I wasn't on all your emails, so I know some of you sent me some of the emails that you received. And I know Sarah did also. Sarah received quite a few emails, and I want to thank Sarah for being here this evening, our wonderful principal at Northstar America, Northstar Academy America, I can think. All right, so there's a slide presentation. I'm not reading the slides to you. You can read them as I move through them. But the most important thing this evening is to listen to our community. And the other is to listen to you as you have a discussion on next steps. Oh, we lost it. I wonder if Wendy, if I sent it. Oh, there it is again. That's okay. These wonderful devices. Yeah. Right. Here it comes. There it is. Perfect. We got it. All right. All right. Perfect. Perfect. All right. Good evening. And so we'll start, and I know we have many comments that we want to hear this evening before you go into a board discussion. So as we get this meeting started, I would like to thank the Northstar Forward Committee for the work that they did. Thank you for your willingness to serve on the committee and for the many hours of work that you dedicated to our district. We are very fortunate in the Redwood City School District to serve such an engaged and supportive community. Regardless of what the work we are doing throughout the school year, we can always count on our families to be part of a committee, and work well with us and provide us with ideas along with our educators. And many times we don't really agree, but we continue to move forward. We also had the pleasure of having a large steering committee that worked with Assistant Superintendent Liz Wolf, which was the LCAP steering committee, which also had many parents, community members, and also board members on it. The work with which the Northstar Forward Committee was charged with completing was not easy. I want to acknowledge and thank them for the seriousness with which they approached the task. Committee members brought a wide variety of perspectives to their work, and as it became clear that there was no single answer that would solve every challenge or satisfy every person on the committee, members worked respectively, even when they did not always agree. I applaud them for that and thank them for their hard work. Next slide, please. As we move through the meeting this evening, we will review the purpose and charge of the committee, how we got here, and the reason for forming Northstar Forward. We've taken several steps since we first presented the tentative ideas to you in April. We'll quickly review how we incorporated your directive and community feedback. We'll then go into an overview of the options. Because the options have several key elements, we'll focus on what makes them different. We'll conclude with a directive from you on how we will move forward. Next slide. Next slide. This agenda item shows that you listen to our community. As we know, during the planning for our future process in the fall of 2018, our community submitted many comments, both positive and negative, about the impact of Northstar Academy on the other schools in the district. In fact, more than 130 pages of comments were submitted that related specifically to Northstar. As part of the recommendations approved by the board in 2018, you listened to the comments and approved to further study Northstar, forming a committee to study the areas of impact that were raised by members of the community. The formation of the committee took place in 2020. We know that Northstar is one of the most sought after schools in the Redwood City School District. It is also a school that has generated controversy since its very beginning. The volume of comments related to Northstar and the strong emotion expressed meant that we needed to address the sense of division that exists around Northstar in order to move ahead as a united, collaborative community of schools. This study is not about dismantling Northstar, but rather about how to move Northstar forward. Next slide. Specifically, the committee was charged with generating ideas that would help us address the challenges that we heard in 2018. The exodus of rising third grade students from other schools, admissions testing that leads to a sense of elitism, and the social emotional impact on students who attend, as well as those who do not meet the qualifications. Lack of access from students attending Bayside schools. Next slide, please. In 2018, more than a few community members suggested disbanding Northstar altogether. And I'm aware that some in the Northstar community are concerned that the purpose of this committee was to accomplish that. As I have stated before, I am not recommending the closure of Northstar. That is not the intended outcome of this committee. Again, the purpose is about how to move Northstar forward while minimizing the impact it has on other schools and increasing access to students from all backgrounds and honor the school's mission of providing an environment designed to meet the unique needs of high achieving and gifted students. Therefore, you see here the two parameters I gave the committee. Northstar will not close. Northstar will move forward with changes that need to be made. The school cannot continue as is. Access was a priority since the committee was formed. However, we didn't use the word equity as much. Since revising our mission, vision, and values last school year, we are now intentionally focused on equity, which means we need to provide access to Northstar for all students. Next slide. The recommendation grew out of the work completed by the Northstar Forward Committee in 2020 and 2022. Next slide, please. Before we review the 4 options, I want to acknowledge that I'm asking you to make a difficult choice by presenting 4 imperfect options for your consideration. In an ideal world, we would have a single solution that checks all the boxes and solves all the challenges. However, the work completed by this dedicated committee of parents, teachers, administrators, and former NSA students and their willingness to study data and express their ideas and opinions honestly has made it clear that there are no easy solutions, no solutions that will address every challenge, and no solutions on which committee reached consensus. As they wrestled with these challenges, the committee members discovered that solutions seemed obvious when viewed in isolation, but complicated when viewed in larger context. We are not the only district that has struggled with an equitable, inclusive way to provide learning for students who need extra academic challenge. Too often, the demographics of schools serving academically gifted students don't match the demographics of the district, as has been reported about as close to home as San Francisco and as far away as New York. I would be proud if the Redwood City School District can create a model that is inclusive, represents our demographic, and serves the needs of students for whom Northstar is a good fit without limiting opportunities for students at other schools. Next slide, please. I'm presenting you with 4 possible options that are inspired by ideas generated by the Northstar Forward Committee that were presented to you during a study session on April 20th. After that study session, we developed 4 options that reflect the committee's ideas, your ideas, and community feedback. Next slide, please. We then shared the 4 options with the committee on May 12th, asked for their feedback via an optional input form, carefully reviewed the written feedback from the committee, and consulted with our CSD staff on implementation details. We refined and polished the ideas, and in some cases, added some elements based on all of the steps above. Next. It is important to note that while staff has done initial research to confirm the viability of each recommended option, each will require additional detailed investigation and consultation with experts in some areas in order to develop a full implementation plan. Once the board decides how to proceed, our CSD staff will begin the detailed work of determining how to implement the plan. Therefore, the key implementation elements of each recommended option should be considered tentative with flexibility to adapt as needed to achieve the board's goals. Next slide. As we present options, I want to acknowledge that this is an emotional topic in our community, and it is my hope that we can build trust this evening, even if we don't agree on everything. I know there are many points of view about Northstar, and we are here this evening to help Northstar and our district move forward, reducing and possibly eliminating divisiveness between Northstar and the rest of our schools. K-5 option. Northstar Academy becomes a K-5 school, feeding a 6th through 8th grade NSA strand at MIT. Next slide, please. 6-8 option. A. Northstar Academy becomes a 6th through 8th grade campus and remains on the Duane Street campus. Sixth through 8th grade option B. Northstar Academy becomes a 6th through 8th grade campus on the Bayside. Next slide. You're there. K through 8th grade option. Northstar Academy becomes a K through 8th grade school with some grade levels located on the Bayside. Similar key elements. All the options have several key elements we would need to implement, some of which are similar and others that are very different. We'll first quickly go through the similar elements that can be implemented immediately. No matter which option is chosen, one element that can and will be implemented immediately is an outreach plan aimed at increasing the number of English language learners and socioeconomically disadvantaged children at NSA. In addition, regardless of any changes to grade configuration, the Northstar School of Choice process would occur in the fall aligned with the district's enrollment and school of choice process. Families would enroll at their neighborhood school, fill out a school of choice form. All eligible applicants would participate in a computerized random lottery according to the following guidelines. Each neighborhood school, we'd have to come up with the manner of how we would allot equal number of spots with a percentage of slots also allotted for EL students, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and come up with a process to do that. And what would that look like? Next slide, please, 19. Another element that will be implemented immediately, no matter which option is chosen, is an increase in Spanish-speaking staff and teachers at Northstar with a staff member serving as a liaison between NSA and 3 Bayside schools, which are Garfield, Hoover, and Taft. Beginning this fall, an extensive outreach program will be implemented to ensure that every family in the Redwood City School District boundary, regardless of assigned neighborhood school, language, economic, or educational background, knows that Northstar is an option that may benefit their student. Universal testing of all second graders is recommended until any of the options are implemented, and if testing is used to assess students for one of the recommended options, we will ensure that all potentially eligible students are tested. The differences in key elements. We now move to the key elements that are different depending on options. Next slide. The grade configuration is obviously different for all the recommendations, with 2 options for a 6-8 campus. Depending on the option, there are differences with the facilities involved and the facility needs. MIT is included in one option, as are Bayside schools. Should we move part of the program to the Bayside, that element would be implemented at Garfield, Hoover, or Taft, all depending on space availability. In addition, expanding kindergarten may mean necessary building modifications to accommodate grades kindergarten through 2nd grade. For example, if a kindergarten playground would need to be installed, modifications to bathrooms may be required. So playgrounds for the little guys, bathrooms for the little guys also. This requires further explanation. The next 22, great. Transportation. Should the program remain on Duane Street campus, transportation from the Bayside is recommended. However, transportation for students from the Bayside would not be necessary if the school moves to a nearby campus on the Bayside. The idea of offering transportation was created by group number 3, lack of access from the Bayside. This group was addressing the factors that create barriers of accessing Northstar from the Bayside, one of which was identified as transportation. Admissions, the admissions assessment. If we expand to kindergarten, the idea of testing 4-year-olds would be new to Northstar, and research that's out there, does not recommend that take place. I know Ms. Shackle has been researching this portion of a recommendation, and she has been working with experts on it, and it is not a task that one should take on. If we decide to move ahead with 6th grade, with a 6th grade option, whichever assessment we use would be universally administered to all 5th graders so that every family understands if their student is eligible. Understanding how to identify various subgroups will take time and research. We will need to create an equitable process to ensure that we are not just doing what we've always done and assessing in a way that ensures all students who can benefit from Northstar know and have access to the program. Therefore, because determining an equitable assessment process will require future work. Next slide. Go back one, I'm sorry. Here, I was right on 23. A number of committee members and members of our community have advocated for creating a model where Northstar philosophy would be implemented at each school rather than placing the students together at one site. Because this idea had considerable support from committee members, I want to explain that the reason this option was not considered is that it would dissolve the school in its current form by eliminating and dedicating a dedicated NSA campus, and it would cost prohibitive, and on a practical level, impossible to implement a compacted curriculum model on each campus in the school district. The Northstar model depends on streamlining and eliminating regular curriculum to make space for enrichment. This requires a critical mass of students and it requires extensive specialized training. However, regarding after-school programming, enrichment funding, we continue to look at that and expand in this area. You recently heard a presentation from Ms. Wolf on the work her team is doing. Slide there. You read the great detail in transition plans for each option. Depending on which option you choose, we'd move through very different transitions. And now we should hear from our community members and then a discussion from the board so that I have a matter to move forward with. So did we want to take those members that are commenting that are in the audience first? We normally do that. So we will start with those members.
Our first speaker is Matt Schwal.
So you're likely going to hear a lot of negative reactions to the four proposals tonight. And I'll opine that that traces back to the negative way that the Northstar Forward Committee was framed. It was framed with a charge to minimize three negative things. And that's not the way that great leaders inspire positive change. When John F. Kennedy wanted to go to the moon, watch his speech. It's a wonderful speech. He didn't say, let's not get beat to the moon by the Russians. He didn't say, let's make sure rockets don't explode. Instead, what he did is he talked about the course of human history, the amazing course of human progress, and he inspired greater progress. And that's what we needed, and that's what we still need. We need one of you to step up and be inspirational and be positive. We need someone to reframe this discussion in a positive way. Someone who can stand up here and celebrate what's great about Northstar, celebrate that it's a top-rated school, and then ask, how can we use that to inspire more positive change? How can we use it to inspire change at other schools? Because there are other schools in this district with real problems, and they're the schools that need the board's attention. So what I'm hoping is that one of you will step up, reframe this topic, send it back to get better proposals that don't break what isn't broken, but instead are inspirational proposals that move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cameron Hoffman, and she's been given additional minutes by Michael and Kim Sterling, along with Amy Crawford.
Thank you to the board and the superintendent for your thoughtful consideration of the community input on this important topic. I have 2 points I'd like to make tonight. One, these proposals are being rushed in violation of the governance standards required by your own board bylaws. Dr. Baker told you twice in the memo and again tonight that these proposals require, quote, additional detailed investigation, consultation with experts, more research. He said clearly more work is needed. Please comply with the governance standards and do that work before making any decisions to change Northstar. Number 2, Northstar is not broken. Let's make the whole district better. Most importantly, our neediest schools, and not pointlessly break a #1 elementary school. Dr. Baker identified U46 in Illinois as a leading example of a racially diverse program. In 2014, U46 redid its whole program after losing a lawsuit on equity and access. Northstar's current program is very similar to U46's updated program with 2 key differences. Let me tell you about that. But first, the similarities. Both programs have separate gifted classes. There's 4th to 8, ours 3rd to 8. Not just middle, not just elementary, same time frame. Both have universal admission screening using COGAT because it's the most inclusive. and report cards and teacher input. Both have seats for all neighborhood school kids who qualify. Both have specialized curriculum delivered just to these learners to meet their needs. Both have gifted teacher training, and both have great leaders running them. What they have different: U46 has a talent development program leading up to its universal COGAT testing to drive equity. And it has a two-way dual Spanish immersion classes for the program. We should stop focusing on Northstar. It's fine, not perfect, fine. Instead, let's do something for our other kids, for our diverse kids, for our Bayside kids. Let's do a talent program to meet our struggling youngest learners' needs in our neighborhood schools. We'll be simultaneously boosting all of our neediest young learners, all of them, not a subset, and reducing what Dr. Baker has described as divisiveness between Northstar and our neighborhood schools. The U46 program, the talent development program, is called AIM. It serves the 2 grades before the Northstar equivalent they have, which is called Ignite. I've researched it. I've looked into it. I'm happy to do more for this board for any questions. I would propose we build the Redwood City Shine program for our 1st and 2nd graders based on the U46 model. That's a successful model. It would mean district-wide in all 7 neighborhood schools, specialized lessons focused on critical thinking skills and creativity. That's good for all the kids. U46 uses the PETS curriculum. I can send it. They have lots of decks. It also includes universal screening at the end of 2nd grade with COGAT and report cards. We have that already as part of the Shine program. And seats for all qualified neighborhood kids to matriculate and shine at Northstar when they get there in 3rd. We had that already. But most importantly, the Redwood City's neediest young learners in all our neighborhood schools would benefit. Or at a minimum, if we want to bite it off in pieces, start with Shine at all 3 Bayside sites, not just Northstar at one of them. Let's meet everyone's needs. I implored the board in April, and I ask again tonight. Let's thoughtfully pivot. Let's come back together as a community, and let's focus on the 70% of the district students that are 1 to 3 years behind academically, not tweak a well-designed school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tony Weevil.
Good evening. Thank you. Wow, no one's going to be able to top Ms. Hoffman's presentation because I think she was exactly accurate and exactly right. But there's a few things I want to add. So I was serving on the Northstar Forward Committee. I also have 5 children. Me and my wife have 5 children in this district. They're at Roosevelt Elementary and they're also at Northstar Academy. And my son Owen spoke at the last board meeting on this topic, and he explained why Northstar made such a huge difference in his life when he moved from their neighborhood school to Northstar. And there's other stories like that you'll find in the comments. I agree with much of what Dr. Baker included in his statement, and I'm so grateful that he allowed me to serve on the committee and be a part of the process. There are a few, though, of the major changes in the proposals that are on the table that I disagree with, and I don't think the board can adopt for the same reasons that Ms. Hoffman addressed. The reason is because, as the board bylaws state, and they mandate that, quote, each individual board member shall, number one, keep learning and achievement for all students as the primary focus, right? To operate effectively, the board shall have a unity of purpose and again, it says number 1, keep the district focused on learning and achievement for all students. And then bylaw 9200 mandates, quote, board members shall hold the education of students above any partisan principle, group interest, or personal interest, end quote. So the issue that I found when I was serving on the committee is I waited to see data or evidence justification for the changes to change the grade configuration or the
Thank you for your
location of Northstar and found none. There was none. So I'll end there if my time's up.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Diana Fu.
Good evening. I want to just mention the principle of things. I was one of the parents that came here to help start the MI program. At the time we were trying to start the MI program, there were people, other parents from other schools who were against it for the reason that it might draw away good students from their neighborhood schools, which is sort of the same complaint that you're hearing from some of these parents from some of these schools. At the time, Trustee McBride had said, we're in a choice system and rising tide lifts all boats. So my takeaway of what he said is that, given that we're in a choice system, what we really need to do is provide more and better choices to serve our very diverse community. As I review these options, I feel like, they're pretty drastic. The grade configuration changes and the selection process changes, those will probably result in changes that really amounts to taking away a choice for the parents, which allows them to basically change their minds about what school their kids will attend in this public school system. In my own case, I had to face that choice because my kid went to an MI, turned out he was poorly suited for it. We had to decide, do we go to a private school? But we're very glad to have this choice that we could make and still stay in the public school system. So I just want to say that thank you for your consideration, but let's give more choices, help the other schools rather than taking away the choice.
Thank you.
So now we will move to virtual speakers cards. Our first speaker is Allie Gilmore.
Yeah, go ahead and stop. That's okay. You can stop.
Allie Gilmore. Allie with an A.
Ellie, if you'll put your hand up, that'd be great.
Can I just ask that when speaker names are called, if you can raise your hand, it would make this process a lot quicker for us.
Maybe we could do like the next in that way.
Our next speaker is Wenjing Sheng.
Hands up. Go ahead. Go ahead, Wenjing. Unmute. Let's go on to the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Lone Hin.
Good evening. I'm the parent of a first grader at Henry Ford. So despite having great teachers, due to the divergent achievement levels in his class, my son's needs are not being met. And for him, differentiated learning consists of self-guided reading on an iPad and meeting with his teacher only once a week. My son has told me he feels out of place and repeatedly asks when the school will teach him something new. And while I love the community at Henry Ford, the school is clearly not a good fit for my child. I know many other families feel the same way. And these children need a place like Northstar now, not in 6th grade. Dismantling or scaling back Northstar, the state's top-ranked public elementary school, does not serve any of the children in this district. It does not accomplish any of this board's stated goals. And forcing prospective Northstar students to remain at their neighborhood school will not magically raise the test scores of other students. You will only have more students with unmet needs. The time and resources devoted to this committee would have been better utilized to find ways to help students who are behind. As an English learner myself, I believe that finding other options would have been more effective than trying to dismantle Northstar. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Megan O'Neill, followed by Matt Collier.
Megan O'Neill, her hand is up.
Hello. I would like to focus my short 90 seconds on the mismatch between the goals identified in the executive summary, which stated that the goals were to focus on the students and to help Northstar serve more students more effectively and more inclusively. 4 options are on the table. A through C would eliminate half of Northstar, so it would not serve more students and therefore would not meet that goal. A through C would also not focus on the students whose education needs are currently not being met by the existing public schools in Redwood City. Cutting half of the grades now would be irresponsible unless and until Redwood City public schools are ready and able to respond and serve the needs of students needing more of an academic challenge, like the boy that the last speaker talked about. That needs to happen first. So this is going out of order. It's not happening in kindergarten through 2nd grade. I have 2 children at Northstar right now. Both were in Redwood City Public Schools. Neither had their needs met. That's why we looked to Northstar. And in fact, one of the schools openly said, we cannot meet needs of children like yours. So at the current time, you're not going to serve more students more effectively. You're going to do what the last speaker talked about, and that is not meet the needs. So before anything happens, none of A through C should be off the table, because you're talking about serving fewer students, which is counter to what the goal that was set out was. Thank you.
Matt Collier.
Hi, thank you all for your time. I'm the father of a rising 2nd grader and a rising kindergartner at Roy Cloud. Northstar was an important draw for my family to choose the Redwood City School District. I want to urge you tonight to pick an option for Northstar that allows the programming to continue to be available K-8 and a standalone school. I personally know the value of these magnet programs, as I myself attended them from 3rd grade all the way through 12th grade. I can confidently say that having access to these programs fundamentally changed my educational career, and that I wouldn't be here speaking to you tonight without those programs. I urge you to support an option where K-8 Northstar continues into the future, so that my children have a chance to experience these programs as well. And if there's a willingness to explore the option as presented by Mrs. Hoffman, I urge you to do so. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker is Anthony Lowe, followed by Lee Jian.
Hi, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I am the parent of 2 children who will be in the Redwood City School District next year. My daughter Mina will attend Northstar next year as a rising 3rd grader, and I have a kindergartner attending Roy Cloud. I'm also co-president of the Roy Cloud Dads Club. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I believe all the options on the table are deficient. I think the speaker said that closing Northstar is not on the table. Well, 3 of the options close 50% of Northstar. And if you go forward with one of those options, it will significantly degrade the experience in the future, and particularly for those students that are there at this time. I don't know what we would do if one of the 6 through 8 options were chosen. We would probably have to leave the district. Thank you.
My apologies. The next speaker is Andrew Hoffman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hi, this is Andy Hoffman. I'm the father of 2 students in the district, and I wanted to speak today because I think that the recommendations presented today are focused on the wrong solutions to very real problems. That is the problem that a majority of this district is underperforming, and I think that the focus of this board should be on lifting up lower performing parts of the district rather than tearing down parts of the district that are performing well. And it's quite evident that Northstar is performing well. It is, as you are aware, lauded as one of the best elementary schools in the state. And negatively impacting Northstar is not something that will be understood or supported in this community. Let's also be clear that the options presented today will negatively impact Northstar. They'll harm its mission, and they will likely end it entirely. They certainly will in its current form. The result is that it may push some kids back to their neighborhood schools. It will push other kids out of the district entirely, but it won't do anything to fix the problems that these recommendations are seeking to solve, especially issues of equity and the focus on equity for the Bayside schools. And I wanted to speak because the community needs you to lead, not to focus on hastily approving indefensible recommendations that are not backed by science, that are still incomplete and poorly formed, and as you're hearing today, will divide the community. There's no reason to adopt any of the recommendations presented, which Dr. Baker himself admits are imperfect and require detailed investigation and consultation with experts.
Thank you for your comment. Your time is up.
Our next speaker is Heidi Wallace.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. In the last 5 years, our district has struggled. We've been seeing funding problems close multiple campuses, teacher retention problems close an entire grade, which isn't even being discussed tonight, test scores move below grade level, and continued disparity between district schools. As a community, we should be focusing on fixing these district-wide problems, but instead we're discussing dismantling one of our more successful schools instead of using it as a beacon. There's no evidence that any proposal in front of us will solve the identified NSA challenges or any of the other district's larger issues. Moving forward with a proposal today would be short-sighted and premature. For example, as Ms. Hoffman pointed out, there are immediate steps that have already been proven effective and measurable in other districts that we can take today that will improve Bayside access to NSA. We have barely scratched the surface in employing such techniques. We instead are rushing into completely overhauling the school structure. And separately, I note that in all the bullet points just presented, never once does it reflect on how such changes will affect our current Northstar students. Dr. Baker cited the U46 district that improved diversity in its gifted program, which focused on removing barriers to entry that previously favored families with money and know-how without restructuring the program. Let's employ and measure their methods around testing access, peer measurement, community liaisons, and talent development before we effectively shut down our award-winning school. That way we can build up all our schools to be award-winning instead of tearing down the one we do have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Susan Bouchard.
Thank you. My comments are focused on the quota cap restriction of the number of qualified students allowed to transfer to NSA from neighborhood schools, since this is part of all 4 proposals. To place a cap on how many students are allowed to leave their home school for NSA is only going to stoke the fire of the perceived elitism that has been blamed as detrimental to the neighborhood school communities. This restriction will only elevate the dubious perception of NSA as an elite place, causing a greater sense of division and competition and create more animosity amongst anxious parents and students. How can the board support this? What is the board's plan to ensure that qualified accelerated learners who are excluded simply because there is now a cap on their homeschool thrive in an environment that is not addressing their needs? Also, there are plenty of students who leave their homeschool for non-NSA programs. Why isn't this quota cap restriction being proposed for all school of choice programs? While I support increased outreach, it's disappointing that Dr. Baker set the tone from the very beginning of NSA Forward that something had to change. This was a closed-minded approach before the committees even had the opportunity to start their work. Through board meeting conversations, it's also apparent that there is baggage and negative personal bias regarding NSA amongst board members. My ask is that any personal bias not cloud the judgment of our trustees and that all of these proposals be rejected and reworked. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Costas Dimitropoulos.
Which one said that again? Vasya, that just popped up. Is that the one you called?
Costas,
All right.
C-O-S.
Hello. Hello.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Costas, are you the Vasya?
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me? I'm getting a pop-up that says I'm mute all the time.
Yes,
So
go ahead. We can hear
okay.
you.
Shall I start from the beginning? Have you heard anything?
No, we're going to start you right now.
All right, thank you. All right, let me start again then. All right. So what I'd like to add to the discussion is empirical evidence that's probably needed at least, or I mean, we can use it from other places. So neighborhood schools typically have a performance and needs that reflect the characteristics of their local demographics, right? So there are sustained relative differences between Redwood City neighborhood schools over 20 years. That kind of proves this. And also there are relative differences that are sustained with schools in other districts here, like St. Carlos, compare St. Carlos, Cupertino with Oakland or Hayward, et cetera, right? And then you can scale down and say, okay, there are differences in K-2 in the various schools. Northstar doesn't play, and these differences may reflect whatever balance and demographic Northstars have. So basically, let's say we're going to change a high-achieving school like Northstar in any of the ways that you say. So how will that improve these lower-income schools in Redwood City or motivate kids to go to whatever Northstar becomes, gets created, right? And what level of confidence exists for success of these things? Are there like examples or models that have been tried and proven in other places that work? Because at the end of the day, there's the legal aspect, there's the ethical aspect, but there's also the practical aspect of, having evidence that a course of action, will lead to success based on empirical results or science data, hard data, statistically or deterministically. That's about it. All right, thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kelly McCarthy, followed by Casey Wright.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to focus my comments on just one of the many issues I have with these proposals, and that is what an incredible waste of time and resources this is. I'm wondering if anyone has thought to take the pulse of the community since COVID. This committee was formed before a pandemic completely shook up everything. And how is this something that would come anywhere near the top of the priority list for this district in a time when so many of our students are underperforming, multiple grade levels below where they should be. And the learning loss is, rampant throughout our district. Not to mention there's a school in our district who has to tell an entire 6th grade class that they have to go to another school for 1 year because we can't hire teachers for them. I'm pretty sure that if you asked most parents, they'd be happy to stay at their neighborhood school if they felt like their child's needs were being met. So let's take this money that we're considering spending on researching, changing, and moving Northstar and bolster the programs and resources in our neighborhood schools and ensure they're meeting the needs of all their students. Let's look at what Northstar is doing right and use that information to make our neighborhood schools more desirable. Focus on building up other school sites, not tearing one down. Thank you.
Casey Wright.
Hi, thank you, trustees, for your service to our community, and I do not envy your job tonight. The superintendent is asking you to choose from 4 deeply flawed options to guide the future of Northstar. 2 are particularly and casually cruel, recommending to eliminate this highly successful educational opportunity for hundreds of students each year. Choosing one of these options without a deeper understanding of the consequences is irresponsible. The board agenda says these ideas have no financial impact at the moment. Well, I guess that's technically true. Deciding tonight is free, but implementation is surely consequential. How will any of these changes be funded? What are the potential second order effects? You do not have to choose any of these imperfect ideas tonight. You do not have to fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy by committing to a process and set of decisions that may not be in the best interest of students. Like many other speakers, I would like to see the energy and time the district brought to this process applied to the incredible number of real crises we face. We have an academic crisis with over 1/3 of our middle schoolers at least 2 grade levels behind in reading and math. We have a leadership crisis. An entire grade has been canceled at Roosevelt for the next school year. As stewards of the school and the district, I implore you to postpone consideration of these options tonight, demand new options to consider, like those Ms. Hoffman offered, and do the work to help the community understand the consequences of these flawed options. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Catherine Stewart, followed by Watam Duda.
Hi, this is Catherine Stewart. I hope everybody's having a lovely evening. So far, out of the 16 speakers who came before me, except for the couple that were not able to get on tonight for whatever technical reasons, I didn't hear one person say that they thought the Northstar should be changed or dismantled or moved or narrowed down or eliminated or reduced or anything even like that. So pretty much most of these people seem to think that their kids were going to be better off going to Northstar if they hadn't even yet been there. And the ones who put their kids through Northstar and on the other side were happy that they put their kids at Northstar. Everybody seemed to be happy with the principal. People seemed to think that their kids were getting good education. And Diana Fu, who was the person who was talking from the MI program about Northstar, was saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. It sounds to me like that's the general opinion, and I can't see why the idea that it must be changed. Serving the idea that somehow you're going to get the other schools to be less angry that Northstar exists, I don't think that's going to happen. When I went to MI with my kid, some people were mad that MI was, elitist and too educational and too hardcore learning. And the same thing can be said about Northstar, that it's too hard and too educationally elitist. So I don't think that's going to change that feeling, no matter what you do. And so I think if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Watam Duda.
Do you think it's Mary Bell? Sometimes right. I wonder if that's he's under using a computer that belongs to Maribel.
That's the next speaker. Next speaker is Maribel Eng.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. This is Gautam Dutta. Maribel's my wife, and that's why we have the common computer. So I'm sorry. Can you let me start? If you can hear me, I'll go ahead and start. Sorry about that. Okay, so my name is Gautam Dutta. I'm managing partner of Business Energy and Election Law, a local law firm here in town. I'm also chair of the Asian American Action Fund of California, which is a political organization. And most importantly, I'm a parent of Beata Eng Dutta, who's a 5th grader at Northstar. I'd like to echo the common saying, which has been mentioned today, which is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Northstar is the best fit for our daughter. And we found this, we know this from experience. We've been to both public and private schools. And this is the best fit what we found for her, that period. Rather than dismantling Northstar, let's focus on how we can ensure that every student has a chance to succeed. Let's ensure that all schools have the support and resources that they need, and that schools don't have to shut down, for example, for 6th grade. Let's focus on bond measures that can help. Let's focus on other measures that could help the situation. Whatever support is necessary, let's talk about that. So for that reason, I asked that all 4 options be rejected, and that we focus on improving access and the opportunity for success for everyone. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jing Su, followed by Kirsten McMullen.
I don't think so. He was using Mary Bell's.
Jing Zhu, followed by Kirsten McMullen.
Yeah, can you give me a response if you can hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I want to say that sometimes when you make a choice, there is unintended consequences. And one of these unintended consequences actually you just talked about, which is your bond measurement. All of these options you're proposing going to generate many, many unhappy parents. And you can see that today. And I can guarantee you that's far exceed the number of Northstar haters their desire might be partially satisfied through choosing one of the choices. Now, one thing you probably will know is unhappy parents will guarantee to become very reliable voters. And they may not vote your way, the way you want it, because they might simply just go to private school. They don't want to deal with this mess. Maybe they don't want to drive 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon to drop off and pick up their kids from Bayside. And for those that stuck with Northstar for whatever reason, every time they look at their kids' diminished education quality, every time they drive that 1 hour in the morning, every time they drive that 1 hour in the afternoon, come back home, that's 2 hours. They'll think about you, who will make this choice that significantly disrupt their life. So I want to, when you guys are going to make a decision about the fate of Northstar. So I want you to know when you make that decision to think about the lives of many current and future Northstar parents that you're going to disrupt, and you're going to ask for their approval to find.
Kirsten McMullen.
Hi there. These recommendations are not sufficient. They're not just imperfect, but they lack an evidence-based approach. The only problem they really adequately solve is the 3rd grade attrition problem. Instead, it would be introducing new problems with huge unknowns of testing preschoolers and the physical infrastructure required to support any of these ideas. Meanwhile, we have too many students well below grade level in our district and not enough support for those kids and their learning needs. I encourage you to do additional research before selecting a path and demand a deeper estimate of the costs and benefits of the changes outlined here. I think that there's got to be a better solution than one of the ones proposed so far. Thank you.
Next speaker is Bara Altaba, followed by Michelle Fogarty.
Hello, can you please confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Dear board members, I reviewed the material that was developed by the Forward Committee. There's a lot of data there that when we can spend a lot of time discussing. Both of my current NSA students were in private schools before. We moved over to Redwood City School District because of NSA. Do not break a good school that has been recognized nationally, like a lot of the options in the report seems to indicate. Look at what NSA is doing well and use that as an example for others in the district. We should not look at NSA as taking the brightest from other schools. It is providing a genuine need. We should look at how we can provide the NSA environment that attracts the bright students at other schools so that people are compelled to stay in their home schools. Ratings is not everything, as the report kind of indicated. In my humble opinion, NSA is providing an environment for students and families to thrive. I appeal to you to look on how we can bring other schools up to par to where NSA is, not the other way around. Thank you very much.
Michelle Fogarty.
Hi, I echo the sentiments of other NSA parents and also want to make it clear that while this board is charged with leading the district as a whole, these proposed actions appear to take direct aim at one school to pile on with criticisms rather than addressing full district needs. In any business model, it's poorly regarded to consider destroying what's working well in one area to address shortcomings in others, and yet this board is willing to do just that. Despite Dr. Baker's assertion tonight, this is not about dismantling NSA. So much of the draw of that very program and learning model would require significant change under all of the proposed options. Further examination of solutions are necessary, such as those Cameron so eloquently provided tonight. All should be considered and would not require deconstructing what is already a successful model for many. My ask is that the board take more time to examine the framework and timing of the data they've received and strongly urge a new survey push prior to enacting any of these proposals. Using outdated data collected 4 years ago at the same time the district was discussing campus closures was naturally going to draw responses full of ire. We've spent 2 years in a pandemic pivoting our learning modalities multiple times throughout, all while many families have relocated out of the area. Now is the time to do more research and ask questions and not implement new structures prematurely. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Katie Getz, followed by Christopher Bouchard.
Good evening. My name is Katie, and I had the honor of serving as a member of the Northstar Forward Committee. We were tasked with 3 things: the exodus of students in the 3rd grade, lack of access on the Bay side, and sense of testing that leads to elitism. There is one proposal before you this evening that addresses these 3 pieces, and I know that I am not going to win any popularity contest saying this, but I encourage you to consider and move forward with the proposal to make Northstar a 6 through 8 school on the Bay side. This addresses the goals with which we were tasked and serves students across the district, not just those who have easy access to the Duane campus. Thank you very much.
Christopher Bouchard.
Hello. I'm asking the board to reject all 4 of Dr. Baker's proposals and pause any major changes to Northstar in the short term. All these recommendations come from a process that was flawed from the beginning and biased in execution. Northstar Forward was formed primarily based on feedback obtained during the 2018 Planning for Our Future survey, also known as the survey that resulted in 4 school closures. That means the Northstar Forward was built on feedback taken from parents who were under the threat of their neighborhood school being closed. That data is also now 4 years old. How many of these participants are even still in the district? Shouldn't we get fresher data? Can't we take a new pulse on the current community and ask them directly if they feel Northstar is broken? Isn't it possible that the vast majority of district parents are proud of our National Blue Ribbon Award-winning school and they don't want to see radical changes? Lastly, Dr. Baker's own comments in tonight's agenda seem to indicate that many of the committee members wanted nothing less than to tear down Northstar. Paraphrasing from the recommended options, and as he said a few minutes ago, there was considerable support from the committee members for the plan that would effectively dissolve the school. Do these committee members not understand the charge given by Dr. Baker, or was this just the goal of some members from the very beginning? Either way, dissolving the school was not part of the charge Dr. Baker gave to the committee 2.5 years ago, and it's concerning that this was the solution many members supported. The whole process was tainted and should be paused and reset. I also agree that continued universal testing and expanded outreach and access should be given more time.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next speaker is David Wright, followed by Mike Beebe.
Can you please confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I first want to thank the trustees for your service to the Redwood City community. I am a proud public school graduate, the child of a public school superintendent, and the dad of 2 current students at NSA. As many have shared tonight, Superintendent Baker has put y'all in a difficult position of choosing from 4 deeply flawed options that do not address the stated goals of the NSA Forward Committee. I implore you tonight to defer this decision and request a revised set of options that are informed by data that directly align to the stated goals of the committee. Do not fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy by committing to a process and a set of decisions that are not in the best interest of students across the district. We simply must do better. Like many have shared, please use the successes NSA has achieved as a guiding light to inspire reform across the rest of the district. Even if the district is hell-bent on ending NSA as we know it, choosing one of these options without a deeper understanding of the consequences of these choices is simply irresponsible. As stewards of this school, I implore you to postpone consideration of these options tonight, demand new options to consider, and do the work to help the community understand the consequences of these options. Thank you.
Mike Beebe.
Mike, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for letting everyone comment. And I sense a strong theme with all of the comments we've heard this evening. As I see it, it really does come down to about 3 main points. First of all, the elements that were common in Dr. Baker's plans that are broadly supported. Let's do a great job publicizing Northstar and all of our schools of choice. Secondly, let's help with test prep and mechanics. Let's make it not something that's weird and strange like the COGAT, but let people know what the COGAT is and give them test prep materials. Finally, let's help with daily logistics, stuff like transportation and aftercare. Those are the easy things. If you really want to go address the 3rd grade shift being a pain point, you have to realize it's not the majority of the schools in the district. It's more concentrated in those schools, and therefore it's much more acutely felt. A direct solution to this would be to spread out the entrance 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, just adding 1 grade each of those years. That gets you what you need, it blunts the impact, and also you don't wind up with the acute pinch at 3rd grade. The biggest thing though, and finally, that everyone has mentioned up to this point, is that we're focusing on the wrong thing. Goal number 1 on this agenda item is to get every kid at 2nd grade to a decent grade level standard. Right now, from our winter iReady data, 52% of the kids cannot read at grade level at 3rd grade. 72% are not at grade level for math. That is district-wide. That is.
Thank you for your comment. Your time is up.
Our next speaker is Meredith Park, followed by Nathan Schmidt.
Good evening. I'm Meredith Park, a Sequoia High parent who lives a half mile from Northstar MIT, and I volunteer with Redwood City Together's Safe Routes team. First, I want to sincerely thank Superintendent Baker and the staff for support in providing information for my master's project on barriers preventing youth from using public transit. Out of this process, it's clear we need to find ways to remove cars from this area around Northstar, meaning limiting cars from daily drop-off and pickups. My fear is that adding grades K through 2 to the Duane location would be a strategically poor decision and undo many of the gains this team has worked so hard to achieve. That said, if you choose to expand Northstar to lower grade levels, I recommend moving any gifted programs to an alternative location away from the area. More broadly, a few years ago, I did a poll, and of the 15 houses on my block, 6 of 7 sent their children to Sequoia High. These same kids attended 10 different elementary and middle schools, 10. Knowing our neighbors believe in public schools by sending their kids to Sequoia, creating a neighborhood boundary middle school campus on Duane with an IB program to serve kids of academically gifted needs throughout the district, in addition to programs serving kids at all levels, may be an option to address these ongoing conversations about Northstar, which I expect will not end anytime soon. Sequoia is a clear demonstration of IB program success. Please consider designing walkable, comprehensive neighborhood schools which serve everyone's needs while reducing traffic, improving both physical and mental health, encouraging kids to be responsible and independent, and building strong and diverse communities. Thank you so much for listening and for all of your hard work. We sure appreciate it.
Nathan Smith.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm a proud parent of 2 Northstar students. I'd just like to analogize here. If you have 10 boats and 9 are sinking, you don't dump water in the one that is floating well. Sinking your flagship will look like equity for a brief, thrilling moment, and you can pat yourself on the back for being a change agent. But instead, you must do the work to lift the other boats. You have no other duty nor higher calling than to save those sinking ships. Don't just do something, don't call a decision here to be seen to take action. You, the board, are responsible for saving those foundering ships. You must save the fleet, not just change. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mohammed Tabrizi, followed by Lily Milton.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed Tabrizi. I'm a parent at Northstar. I signed up to cede my time to Cameron Hoffman, so suffice it to say that I completely agree with her sentiments. And I would also like to add that what a colossal waste of time all of this has been. To waste resources of the district instead of paying attention to the education of the lower income students, and to spend that time and resources on this fool's errand, it's unbelievable. Would not be tolerated in any other sector except for the school district. I would like to urge the trustees to reject every one of these ideas and to reconsider based on scientific data and not to break one of the few things in this district that works. This has been a terrible demonstration of leadership by the administration and frankly also by the Board of Trustees. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, sure. No, we know that. We know that.
Thank you. My apologies. He a speaker's card was submitted at the very end. Yeah, I'm not blaming you at all. I'm sorry. Our next speaker is Lily Melton.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Lily. I think you know most of you, and I'm an Orion parent. And I just wanted to say tonight briefly that I really urge you to move forward with bold structural changes, and that although you may mostly be hearing from the parents most likely to be directly impacted by changes that are on the table tonight, I do want to say that there's a large community of parents who are asking for changes that will benefit the entire district, only a select few. Many parents have been tuning in all year and have been supportive of big changes. And although there may not be a lot speaking tonight, given that the school year is closed and people are off, there is still a large community who are behind changes. So I just urge you to be bold and have courage and continue to think what makes the most sense for the whole district. Thank you.
Our final speaker's card is from Beatrice Chan.
Good evening. My name is Beatrice Chan, and I'm a parent of a Northstar student. Like many other parents voicing their concerns, I too believe that the options are deeply flawed, and I ask that you present new options that address the real concerns, which are, 1, how do we introduce and support enrichment programs in our community schools so that we can keep our students from moving away to either private schools or into programs like what Northstar is presenting? And 2, how do we help our current students meet grade level expectations of the state and of the nation? I think that what you are presenting right now is deeply flawed because you're taking a school that has modeled something that other schools can take, and you're trying to dissemble it. If people of other schools are not knowing how to get into Northstar, or they're not understanding, or they're not aware, I think that's an easy solution to help and present information on how to get into Northstar, how to be with their students, and how to get them to test for the entrance exams. But I think you guys need to address the two main concerns. Thank you.
And then just one thing, I just got an email from Maribel put in her own card, but her husband put in a card. So if we could go, yeah, so if we could get to Maribel, what's the last name? There she is. She's using the same computer. So yeah, go ahead, Maribel.
Hi, my wife, Maribel is currently on the phone, so she's trying to call in through the phone. Do you see her?
Yeah, there's another one.
Okay, hold on. I don't see a phone. I don't see a phone where the phone numbers are. I don't see a hand raised.
Lower your hand.
She says he said she's on the phone.
You give like the last couple of digits.
Mr. Ang, what are the last four digits of her telephone number?
Can you hear me?
Yes. What are the last four digits of her telephone number?
The last four.
8984.
Oh, hold on. I'm just talking to her now. Let's see. What did you, are you? Okay. She's on the computer. She's on a computer from her phone. They're trying to identify you.
Oh, further down. Oh yeah, I see it further down. Do you see it, Jesse? It's further down. It's underneath Christopher. There. You've got it. Go ahead, Maribel. Maribel?
You raised your hand.
Okay, this is Gautam. Maribel's not. This is not where she is.
Well, we're unable.
Maybe if you're on the phone, can she be put on speaker? Maybe we could hear her that way.
Yeah, there's two. I think okay, no, this one just.
Hello?
Yes, here we go.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. I concede that time to technical difficulties. I just wanted to make. I'm sorry. You can have my time then. I do want to echo a lot of the other comments that were made, but I want to get a little bit more specific with the struggles that my own student encountered before she came to Northstar, and it had to do with, I think, the lack of understanding of kids who are bored, who are need to be engaged at a certain level, and it's a challenge just like any other challenge that other students may face. And so the whole idea of elitism, I think, is misplaced. I think that we need to also focus on the fact that students who come to Northstar have struggled in other environments, and that is why it's not just a happy little change. It's actually a search for something that works for one's child, which, as all parents, we care very much about where our children spend their days. And to be unhappy the entire day because teachers or the environment or other students don't understand them, or their learning style, or their individual interests, or their extreme need to understand other subjects, that is definitely a need. And what we like about Northstar is that most of the teachers there love what they teach, and they really see the students as individuals. I think if we spread that philosophy all across Redwood City, we would fix a lot of the problems that students face when they struggle. And that's, so that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. now it's a time to have more discussion in regard to the options, the next direction.
Yeah, do you mind if we
You wanna
take a
take a break?
bio break? Yeah, because
Okay,
normally we would
got it.
take one at 9, but we've actually been sitting here since 5.
Right.
So,
Go ahead.
okay.
10 minutes. Okay, let's start. And we do have Sarah Shackle here also, who is definitely, you all know, she's the principal at Northstar. And we also have one of our former students who also served on the panel, Mr. Morales, who was here, who served on the committee with us. And I believe Miss Kelly, wasn't that one of your students? One time? All right, Mike, would you like to
Yeah,
start?
I can go ahead
Or-
and start.
I think
Okay.
Maria said.
Maria, did you want to start? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead. Never mind. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Thank you to the committee, our speakers tonight, our emailers, people on Zoom, people in the audience, staff that helped work on this, appreciates everyone's participation and involvement in the discussion here. There are a few things that I'd like to discuss, and so I'm going to run through them now. First, when we're looking at this, I think one of the things that we should discuss is what criteria would we even use to make a decision? I'd propose that some of those criteria would be, what's the financial impact? How's it funded? What won't be funded if we shift money? Like, what are those trade-offs? I think we'd also want to discuss the criteria. How does any change that we'd put in, reach our goals in the LCAP? It's one of the things that we want to discuss. I think, does that change align with the adopted vision, mission, the equity policy? And related, does it shift the demographics of the school to be more representative of district demographics? Understanding and laying out this criteria is critical because our CSD is it's a complex system, and we can't really look at any school program or any change in isolation. We have one-time federal funds coming to an end. We have a structural deficit in our general fund. We have a brand new CBO, declining enrollment, universal TK and pre-K. They're taking up more classrooms, countywide challenges in staffing. There's possible construction upcoming in a bond measure. Climate, traffic, safe route to school, all these things have to be considered when we're looking at a change that, of any kind of magnitude. So that was one thing. The other thing that would occur to me is that, we should really, when we're looking at this agenda item and talking about it, we should kind of discuss what are our priorities in that list of the things, the charges that were in there. And look, it's really tempting to pull in all kinds of prioritization because there's so much that goes on in the school district. So I'm going to try pretty hard to stay within the bounds of this agenda item just to keep the conversation boxed. But I think that knowing that prioritization is pretty important because, for two reasons. One, it'll give us a framework to see how we're evaluating these trade-offs. And it's also going to provide context for how we look at each option. So for me, when I think of those three items, I think, this was kind of in the board memo, we should prioritize access. That's the one that must change. And I'll take one liberty that it's not just access at the base side. I really think that the access should include generally more closely matching the demographics of our school district. I think that really needs to change. After that, I would say, yeah, sure. Okay. I understand third grade disruption. I don't want to minimize the impact that some people feel by that. But it's possible that if access were sufficiently addressed, the disruption might look totally different than it does today. And whatever solution that would take might be totally different. The third thing I want to acknowledge also is that, Northstar is one of many non-boundary schools. And I think when we're looking at these choices, I think, or any part of this that's in front of us tonight, I think we should be cognizant about when we're making a Northstar decision or when we need to or ought to up-leveling it and think of it as like, hey, this is a non-boundary school decision, something with, specific examples. When we talk about transportation and we talk about outreach, are we limiting those only to Northstar, or is that a non-boundary school that we should do? Because I think we've heard those kind of requests before, and it's okay for us to make special decisions and say that. We just have to have a reason for it and be able to say, explain our thought process for it. And I think there's places where we should be thinking up, in that one. Anyway, so given all of that, the third item to discuss is that, I'll propose how we could move forward here. First of all, the actual proposals that we put in the board memo were really incomplete. They don't have any of the implementation details or any of the data to understand any of the context that I talked about or the impact for RCSD. And the packet says that. And so, and tonight we're not really taking an action. We're not making an action item. We're having a discussion. And so, but that makes it really hard to evaluate what's the true impact of any of those changes. And even if they really were more fleshed out, they're really significant changes. And I'd love for us to be able to think of them in terms of maybe pilots, to be able to say, hey, if we want to make a change, is there a way to do a smaller change that can get us in that direction and do a little bit more iteration where we could say, do we learn something from that and figure out what's the right decision? Because every change that we make is going to have influence on what the right decision is for the next one. And do that. So, maybe when we have the details, we might be able to look at one choice. We might be able to look at one choice and say, yeah, that's the one. I'm not really optimistic that even once we have all the details out, we'd ever be able to say that one is the exact right one. And that's why, if we could frame it in terms of pilots might help out. Because they always are going to have knock-on effects. And it's really hard, as much as we think about what those knock-on effects could be, to really have a sense of be certain that we know what they all are. So I kind of find that the only responsible way for us to, for the direction for us to go in would be to say, pursue the efforts that are already underway. The outreach, the transportation, the staff changes that can be put in place prior to the 22-23 enrollment period. So that's, for the 23-24 school year. On the outreach and transportation, I do think it would be helpful to have some additional details around the cost and whether that trade-off to be able to do that cost, and also whether it's for not all non-boundary schools, like is it a meet RCSD and as part of that, or is it something different? And if it's special, why is it special? We're also missing the part about ensuring success. It's one thing to provide access, to provide outreach and make sure that students get there. We're missing anything about how we ensure that they feel like they belong and are successful there if anything is extra needed there. I think that could be an awesome opportunity to partner with the site and the community there to say, what are ways to be able to make sure that that happens? I think we could consider a change also in the enrollment process, not with what we have right now. But I do think that if we were to, to sort of build in representation from the different enrollment boundaries, the U46 school district that was mentioned talked about how, they were just making these kind of changes. That's the direction that they went in. And their gifted coordinator there, April Wells, she has a book and no relation, by the way. Her book has, she wrote Achieving Equity in Gifted Programming, Dismantling Barriers and Tapping Potential. And what she talks about in there is that you apply universal screening, which RCSD did, and utilizing building level criteria instead of national norms to identify students. Super interesting idea. I don't know. Could be a possibility in there. That might be a way to really also take the process that we have in place and drive it towards the changes that we want to see. I think if we, looking at enrollment processes that had worked before, and frankly, looking at other processes that had worked before is probably a good place for us to start. As opposed to trying to invite them in. But if we really wanted to do that, we'd have to make sure it was well discussed and decided on before the enrollment process started, so that that kind of thing could be taken from there. Beyond that, I can't make any recommendations with what we have here because of just all the missing detail. I can't answer even my own criteria that I laid out at the beginning. There's parts of things where I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I see what that solves, but I also see what it creates as a problem. And So I don't know. So I'd propose that the direction be that, if you can come back with, if there's a plan that we want to pilot, that we can come back with that can say, here's the criteria that it wants. Like, this isn't going to happen. I don't expect that could possibly happen before the 22-23 enrollment period. So we're talking about sometime next year. If someone were to come in and say, hey, this is one, here's the cost, the trade-off, but we really think it helps, like, this part of the LCAP, or I don't know, like some sort of plan in that sense. I think that's the right place where we could have the conversation to say what those changes are. Yeah, that's basically the way I kind of looked at this. That was the discussion I had. I'd love to hear from the others about what they're thinking.
Maria, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think, like Mike, I'm a little conflicted in some of this, but to me, I always think of the students, and there are students who really benefit from a program like Northstar. So eliminating has never been one of the things that I thought should be done. But, it is a school without boundaries. So I think that we need to try and think about it when it comes to enrollment and outreach, like the other non-boundaries schools. Having said that, I think, Dr. Baker, you had a slide that talked about things that all these recommendations had in common, and it had to do with outreach, staff, and enrollment. So I think, I can't remember the other one, but I think that those are things that we can start to work on and align them again. As Mike said, you have to think about, if you change this, then it has an impact on that. So with any changes, of course, you'll have to make sure that the community knows about it and give them ample time to digest it and provide feedback. So I don't expect it to be done right away. Also, like Mike, I think that there is just a lot of unanswered questions and information that is needed. And for that, you're going to need time, especially with all the other priorities and, trying to come out of COVID. So I am also in favor of some sort of a pilot, but again, once you have had time, you and your staff, to do the research and provide us with more information. And I'd like to hear from some of my other colleagues.
Alyssa or Janet?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Baker, to all the staff who've worked really hard on all of this, and to the committee members, some of which are in the audience. Thank you very much. I know how hard you all worked on this, and I really appreciate it. I also want to say thank you to all the speakers and the commenters that we got through email. We've been on quite a journey with all of this. I was sort of reflecting back to how this all started. And, it really does go back to kind of 2017, 2018, when we were looking at the reimagining Redwood City, reimagining our school district. And as many of the speakers have said tonight, and, we've also been talking about, there's been a lot of changes. And I think, we sort of got this ball rolling because we had committed to it back in 2018 as part of the process that we would put together a committee to look at Northstar, because it did have a lot of comments that were generated as part of the process, and we didn't really address them at the time. So I really do appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I think what I'm struggling with, and I think what, I'm hearing from my fellow board members, and I think it's, Dr. Baker, what you struggled with, right, in putting together a recommendation and having options, is that, frankly, none of the options that are presented really feel like the right one, right? If any of them, for me, it would be, broadening the access to the programming like we have at Northstar, because I do think it's very popular. It fits the needs of the students who are there. We've heard a lot from other students and parents who would like to see more of this sort of thing at their school site, right? So to limit any of that doesn't make any sense to me. So that takes off 3 of the recommendations or the options. And then when I try to think of K-8 and thinking of beginning to test and try to assess 4-year-olds, I'm really struggling with that. And for a lot of reasons, I don't think that's the best idea. I do agree that, if we'd want to put focus, we could, think about that a little bit more. I instead like some of the ideas, and, maybe it's an opportunity to kind of step back and recognize that, in 2018, we closed and merged schools. We had just sort of got into those new configurations, and then COVID hit. We had remote learning. There's been a lot going on. Oh, and then declining enrollment is just huge. And again, that's not just a Redwood City issue. That's a San Mateo County. It's a California. It's a nationwide issue. Particularly in some of these high cost areas, declining enrollment. And so I have concerns about trying to start, another K2 if we were to think about that, because I already feel like we're running some other small K2s or small schools now. I mean, we went through one set and we did bring on a new chief business official, Rick, and we also have Priscilla, who's still here. And I know they're both working hard to kind of look at our finances and think about all of that. We were just starting to get some enrollment information and staffing information. So I have concerns about just putting more resources into even thinking about that with all the others. So my recommendation would be that for now, we keep the configuration that we have, the 3rd through 8th grade at Northstar. But we try to address some of the other things that we've been hearing about. And already we've committed and we're already doing some of the things that I think will help us meet some of the goals that we have talked about in terms of diversification at Northstar, ensuring that every student who needs that program is getting that program, ensuring that more students at our school sites are also getting what they need, right? Because we've talked about wanting to ensure that other school sites have enrichment electives, have that strong, critical thinking, that team building and all that kind of stuff. So I'd prefer that we, put more of our resources into thinking about how do we, as people said tonight, kind of lift all boats. We've talked about that before, really build up our other programs. And maybe pause on trying to do anything radical right now, because I just don't think the time is now. But I would like to see if I don't know what the rest of we'll ultimately decide, but I would like to ensure that we do implement, continue with the universal testing to make sure, encourage those, particularly those that have been traditionally marginalized or who are socioeconomically disadvantaged or ELs, that they are, getting communication and outreach, they understand the programming. I also feel like we need to understand what the barriers are, because we know that we had 25 students who basically were accepted to Northstar, many who chose not to come. So I think we need to have a better understanding of what are the barriers, or not assume what the barriers are. And I really like the idea of focusing some additional, on the Bayside, our K2 program, really thinking about how can we provide some additional resources, provide additional program. The last couple of years, we've done a lot with the National Urban Alliance. Of course, we've had our SEAL program. We know there's a lot of best practices that can help with, really rising kids up, working. I mean, a lot of the speakers talked about tonight how we do have kids who are below grade level. We need to be focusing on that. So I'd really like us to see more focus there. So, yeah, I'll stop there. I mean, I've got 4 full pages of comments that I could give. And I certainly, depending upon where this goes, Dr. Baker, I'll share with you more specific ideas that I have. One other comment I did want to make is I was going back to some of the email comments that we got back in the April chunk of of emails. And there was one, I mean, there was a bunch of really good ones, but there was one from 3 committee members who sat on that committee. And I think they had a lot of really good ideas about thinking about measurable goals that we could think about both for, you know, how we increase representation at Northstar. And then they also had ideas about how to improve some of our other schools. And I think we should really look back at some, you know, there's so much there that I think has sort of come in that I think it would be good just to kind of look at some of that, and maybe we could come up with some specific measurable goals on all of this. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so I may have more to say after I hear from Janet and Cecilia, but that's it for now.
This is why I let Elisa go first, because she basically said everything that I had written down. So my notes are all over the place. Forgive me while I find my trails. I do want to say, first of all, I appreciate all the emails that came in. I did not reply to any of them, but I read every single one of them that came in up until 4:45 today, because we had a 5 o'clock closed session. I have maintained that I believe it's important to reach the goals of the committee with minimal impact on the current Northstar school. And I believe that our first 3 options are drastic changes that would negatively impact Northstar. So I'm not in favor of those. That said, as Elisa mentioned, talking about our enrollment, we were just looking at our kindergarten numbers and they are low. They're way down. And I have concerns about adding K2 to Northstar in that it would negatively impact our other schools. In the kindergarten numbers, we're going to be looking at probably combo classes and losing teachers and all the things that make schools unhappy. So I'm concerned about adding K2. I am not in favor of adding K2 to the current Dwayne site. It would, there would be too much of a financial impact having to add the kindergarten playground there, the bathrooms. That said, you know, we could talk about putting a K2 on the base side. I have concerns about that as well, the environmental impact of the non-boundary schools, of sending more cars over there, assuming that it would be attended by students from all over the district. We also have grade configurations that are all over the place, K5, 6-8, 6-8, K8, 3-8, and now the thought of adding a K2. I think that we need to simplify things. Let's see. I am concerned about the, Dr. Baker, you said the additional investigation and consultation with experts. That's more staff time, more financial impact on the district. We've already put so much into this. So I would like to start out with simple changes, things that take less impact. And I think you highlighted those. The outreach plan, enrollment, staff liaisons, Spanish speaking staff, universal testing. I think those are important. And I do want to go back to some of the values that we worked up as a board, starting with equity, to instill passion in learning, emphasizing student strengths and gifts for all learners, and innovation, to analyze systemic practices, including racial biases, through an equity consciousness lens that dismantle barriers to student learning and emotional well-being. And I think that's what we need to see happening in our district. And I think that our work with NUA and the MTSS will build up our other schools and will focus on this equity and innovation. And I think there's a chance that it's very possible with all that work, we would see less exodus from those schools to Northstar. And I think that is one of the issues that we need to address. And then, just going back to, you know, everything that we've been through since 2018 with the, you know, closing schools and then COVID, I don't think that we have a full understanding of the impact of both of those on enrollment at our other schools and the academic levels of our students. And I think we need to step back and focus on what that impact has been, and how we can bring up the students at all of our schools, rather than taking away from the students taking away from what's at Northstar currently. So my recommendation would be starting simple and focusing on those things that you mentioned, the outreach plan and whatnot. I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks everyone for your input. Definitely hard decisions. It's a tough subject, yet my sentiment is what everyone has said. I actually said actions speak louder than words. Now, when we talk about being equitable, and if we want to rip the Band-Aid and start making changes, perhaps we have to think about our own implicit bias and maybe not be so selfish. I would tell you that as part of the committee, and I was part of that group with the lack of Bayside students, as a Bayside resident myself. I do think that we do need to make changes. However, with all the emails that we got, and of course, there was a lot of parents pro and, with or against Northstar. I feel as board members, we are here to look at the well-being of every student, right? So when we talk about making changes and perhaps even ripping the Band-Aid, we also have to do our homework. Yes, I do want to thank the committee, the Northstar Forward Committee, for all the time and effort that everyone put in it. And although we want to make changes, and I'm hoping that, yes, we will make changes, that they're not as slowly as they may be. I know Janet just mentioned about the maybe cost effect of doing the research, but I think that if we want to do the right thing, perhaps we need to look into some research and see. Because when I read the article on the Illinois school district with the U46, they started with the K2, and then I think that was not working. So we really need to see what we want to do to better serve all kids in the Redwood City School District. Definitely the Bayside parents would need to be, we would definitely have to do more outreach. They really need to get, I can't even think of the word, trained, or really give them the resources so that they can make better decisions for their students. I do feel that some type of change needs to happen though, because moving to the Bayside would give those parents access. Now, it may not happen now, but I would think, on a personal opinion, we've given Northstar, although it's not broken, the chance to be at the Duane campus, obviously for a very long time. So if we want to see some change, we definitely do need to do the outreach. We need to make sure that everybody knows about it. And again, just not Northstar, but as Mike mentioned, all the non-boundary schools. And again, with the said and all the comments, we really do need to get more data before we move on with any of the decisions. So I would recommend that we just don't check the box, but that we really, and in fact, I also think it would be on a positive side, getting the outreach and maybe continue with the universal testing and getting the kids that need to be up to par with, perhaps even just the reading, would eventually benefit the district in the long run, because eventually that is what, as a district, we should be doing, right? Now, even with that said, I do feel that we do have great schools. We did learn from parents when we were closing schools, how wonderful their schools were. And so it happened, the merge, the closing of the schools. And again, people are adapting to what happened. Obviously, the pandemic hit and it's very unfortunate. But I would, as my other colleagues mentioned, I would think that we just can't make a drastic change and that we really need to do our due diligence to make sure that we do something for the greater of all students in our district.
Cecilia, if I can follow that, I think that you're right. Our duty is to all students. And to me, we always have to put the students at the center of our decisions. And with thinking about the choices, I kept thinking about the students that are there now and how to minimize that impact on them. But also, we cannot forget about those who have that chance to go there, who want to go, whose needs are not being met, and how do we make that happen for them? How do we serve their needs as well? So although the process may be slow, which is a lot what happens in education, we need to start thinking of all of them and align more with the goals of the LCAP and figure out how do we provide those environments for all the children that would like to go there. So again, I'm with, after listening to you guys, I'm still with the universal testing, the outreach, adding the staffing, and the enrollment changes. Oh, and I also wanted to say thank you to all the parents and speakers and all that committee members, because I know that it took a lot of hours. And just because we didn't take any of these recommendation, it doesn't mean that we don't value your opinions or the effort that went into it, because this has provided us yet another opportunity to talk about it and to really think about what we're doing and how to move forward with all of it. As Janet said, there's so many emails, we just couldn't reply to them either. So thank you, everybody.
So we have been discussing this for quite a period of time. It started way back when Elisa and Maria know it. And so do my colleagues, Sarah and Wendy. It's been out there for many, many years. I hear what you're all saying. I have my notes that I already put together for the direction in which I thought you were going to go after reading all the emails, after our individual conversations that we have when we meet individually, or no, we meet by two, and then board president by herself. Because of the Brown Act, we can't meet together not unless a meeting is agendized. And with the thoughts of your conversations, I gathered it was going to go in this direction, even though the memo was already written and we went forward with the memo. I went forward with the memo. I'd like to, really investigate what that pilot would look like, but you have to understand that it's not going to happen right away. It wouldn't happen for another maybe 2 years down the road, because you'd have to do really good research, talk to people. If we're actually wanted to look like something like the Illinois program, which is really seems to be successful in meeting the needs, that takes a period of time. What I hear is that we definitely, the things that we can do, as I pointed out in the memo, which we can do right now and continue to do and do them well, is definitely implement, immediately start the outreach and what that looks like. Work very closely with Sarah, work very closely with Michelle Ramon, get out there and let parents know that, what this program is all about. We'll get out there in the Bayside, get the information. We'll continue with the universal testing. We already started, we need to continue with that. We have started with a Spanish-speaking staff member at Northstar. I mean, the office staff is, the office manager is now, someone homegrown here, bilingual, and we're going to have another teacher that's going to be there that is going to be Spanish-speaking, and it's going to be, because Sarah and I have met, going to be a liaison between Northstar and the Bayside. So that's all in place. The other thing is in regard to transportation. That's something that we need to look at, and maybe not only, and when we open up transportation, it's not only for NSA, for those Bayside kids coming to NSA, you're going to have to start, we're all going to have to start thinking, what is the cost of that? Because it can't just be to one site. That's not equity. We have to give it, to those students who need it. So I can bring back that cost, get that for you right away. And the other piece is the staffing of the bus driver, Wendy, which what our staffing is like. It is not only Redwood City School District, the districts up and down the peninsula, the districts throughout the state. Rick and I were just talking about the district where he's coming from, where and their unified school district. I told him what happened with Roosevelt. He said the same thing is happening up there. And they have a high school. And to find those people that have the content specific credential to teach, they're not finding them. So not unless the state gave us a little wiggle room with the credentialing, which I know Wendy keeps asking for me, it's going to be very difficult for the next few years as far as staffing is concerned. So there is no option at this point in time to come back with. I'm just going to put it out there. There is no option right now to come back with, except with what I said previously in regard to the outreach plan. We'll get that to you and I'll let you see what it looks like. Making sure, looking at our staffing, that we get more people of color at Northstar and those that speak, which would be the other language up for the Bayside, which is mainly Spanish. We will definitely also look at the transportation piece. And again, now when I say transportation, if there are students on the Bayside that are coming to some of our other schools that are non-boundary, we need to think of them too. Because all the equity work that we did, that plays in tune to it. Questions? Sarah, would you like to comment?
So thank you. I mean, I agree with that I think, we'll continue to implement some of the things that'll help meet the goals of adding diversification to the Northstar. I also would like, I know we're already doing this, but I think a part of, the comments that we heard was ensuring that every school site is, sort of meeting the needs of every student. And I know, that's hard when you have, an individual teacher in the classroom, you've got 5 or 6 different grade level spans, you've got, individual students who all have individual needs. But I would like for us to continue to think about, how do we continue moving in the direction where we are doing more of that. And it does seem like the NUA program has really been working, certainly at some of the school sites where
the strategy is not a program.
Sorry, not a program. It's the strategies. You're right. You're right, John. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Because you say program and you think it's.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah. But you know what I mean? It's the strategies. Similar with SEAL, there's these strategies of really having high academic language, high expectations, rigorous, joyful learning, all that kind of stuff that, we have heard some themes that there are some classrooms and some schools that could be doing more. So I think we need to just continue to do that.
And so I think what you hear in the and you're gonna,
I know, and we have a lot of stuff still.
Many of you sit on different committees with the Superintendent Liz Wolf. So you have the LCAP coming. Many of you sat on the MTSS and what that's going to look like. There are hopefully additional dollars coming to work with our unduplicated population of students, provided that, that trailer bill passes. And if it does, then there can be that offering. The thing that concerns me about the dollars coming from the state is finding the staff to do it. And I know when you listen to Ms. Wolf next week of the plan and the people she hopes to hire to implement is a real concern. So parents that are out there, if you know of anybody who would like to work with the Redwood City School District as far as being a teacher, let Ms. Kelly know, bachelor's degree, and then we'll do the rest to get them trained and everything else. But that's a true fact. And my colleagues up and down the peninsula, we're all struggling with it. And money is there, but it is the staff that we need, the people to do the work. So in conclusion, I'll go in this direction. I'll write this up, what we're going to do immediately. Myself and Sarah will start researching what a pilot would look like. But like I say, that's not going to happen for a couple of years down the road. There is no way. You just need to know that.
So can I just ask, what kind of pilot are we actually asking for? Are we actually asking for you to do, because I think my recommendation would be
not to even look at K2.
Well, I think that's what I said. That I'm not. I mean, given our declining enrollment, I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out how much staff time do you want to continue to put into this? I mean, some of the research that you're looking at me. I don't know. I mean, I guess you guys can research it some more and come back to us and let us know. I mean, just the base, and I'm not an educator, I'll just put that out there. But the basic research I looked at, I'm just not convinced yet that that's the right move. I mean, I like the idea of putting more resources into the students who really need it, and ensuring that every student is getting what they need. I'm not sure a K-8 Northstar is going to meet that. I don't know. I just think we need to be clear on what kind of pilot we're asking John to do, if that's what we're asking him to do.
Yeah, and I
don't want him to spend a bunch of time and energy on something that.
And just to be clear, I wasn't asking for any specific pilot. All I was saying was that if the discussion came around to saying, hey, we should be looking at a grade configuration, my request would be that instead of doing something majorly disruptive at once, that we instead, look at a way to pilot the change. I don't think that there's if we take as our priority to say that we want to diversify the demographics at the school, and we're putting in, I mean, this is a pilot, what we're doing now with universal testing and adding outreach and changing the staff. If we see that that's not getting the result that we're looking for, there's not a meaningful shift in there, I think that would be the time that we'd come back and say, what do we do next as the pilot? And maybe we figure out a framework to go for that. That's how I was kind of thinking of it.
All right. So then what I hear you saying is that go forward with the items that I mentioned previously. I can discard that pilot piece, but work very diligently on these other pieces to really frame it in a matter that we're out there. We're going to definitely do the outreach, put a plan together for the outreach. We definitely have a plan for staffing. And then also another big piece, I just want to put it out there because it's going to come back to you, is a transportation issue for access.
Right. And we could also look at, are there additional resources we ought to be putting into the Bayside schools or specific students in our district to help them? I mean, we have our other goals around, reading at 3rd grade, but also just specifically the students that we've talked about that we want to make sure if they need Northstar, they're getting it. So the focus on the K2, so that could be more of the resources going to those kids, in other words, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm just.
Well, and then would we also think about doing what U46 did and actually giving the tools to those kids to actually be able to take the test? Because obviously there's a lot of parents that don't even know about the test, right?
And that's part of this all of implementation of the outreach and what that would look like. Okay, to become a Northstar student, this is what's going to have to take place. when you're talking about tools, I think if you looked at some of the emails that some of the parents sent us in regard to those tools, there were different types of references to guides and so forth to help their children when they're moving forward to take this test and prior to.
I think that would be important to make that district-wide, because I know there are some teachers who are doing that with their students. And not every student in the district is receiving that.
You know, what's interesting about that is it's, in some ways it, you know, the test is a part of the application process, but really I'd rather, we're not putting emphasis on prepping for a test for the application process, but instead we're investing in our students to ensure that they're getting the teaching and the learning that they need. You know what I mean? Because anyway, so I get a little bit leery about talking about prepping for the test for Northstar versus providing them, you know, the high level kinds of curriculum that we've talked about, the rigorous, you know, joyful learning. I mean, all the kind of stuff that we're trying to do. So anyway, I just need to put that out there because it does make me a little bit squeamish.
I wasn't saying that we don't need that. I agree with you on that too.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good. Yeah.
And same here. I mean, I did say testing, but obviously we want to make sure that they're reading, therefore they're going to be able to succeed. And eventually, if those parents want to have those students move to Northstar, then they could do so. And therefore it would be more equitable.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad way to put it. And I just want to note that we're actually trying to problem solve here instead of like trying to set direction. And I think that the way I would phrase the direction is we want to see changes in I would like to see changes in the testing process that is the entry method to get to Northstar. We are implementing universal screening right now. We're adding outreach so people are available for it. And I look to you to say, if that's the direction that we want to go in, let's try these things out. And if you have other ideas of how these things could be improved to increase with the goal of increasing the diversity at the school and the access of the students, please bring them back to us and say, these are the things that I think we should be doing. But I'm not trying to problem solve or say, this is what I think you should do. That's the direction that I'd like us to go in. Like to see what are we doing differently for the testing process to be able to bring in a more diverse student body.
All right. That's easy. It's easy enough. It's just 3 bullets that I have right here.
And not to lose the side of the equity issue and how we deal with the non-boundary schools and trying to make it equitable also with Northstar as well.
You know, and I just want to add, because, you know, we're focusing on Northstar tonight because that was the agenda item. And, you know, we had made a commitment to the community that we would do this research and thing. But, you know, it's interesting because we all just went to promotion ceremonies and graduation ceremonies that were very joyful at every one of our school sites. And I had an opportunity, and I know all of us had an opportunity to talk to students and staff at all of our various school sites. And they love their school. So we're focusing so much on Northstar and this whole idea that there's a certain group of students who want to get in there, who want to be there, and they love their school. You know, Northstar is a great school, but we have a lot of great schools in our district. And I feel like it's important to say that sort of as a boundary to this whole thing. You know, I was at the Roosevelt graduation and it was just so beautiful. The students up there talking about how many of them had been from preschool to 8th grade together. They loved their school. There was such camaraderie. They talked about their teachers and how wonderful they were. And we have that at all of our school sites. So we're focusing on Northstar for a specific kind of program, a specific kind of student, but we have all sorts of students, right? We have all sorts of programs. We have all sorts of wonderful schools. And we just need to remember that anyway, I think enough said, but I just want to, we all know that and we talk about it, but I think it's important for the audience to hear that.
And then as you're saying this, I would also like to publicly give thanks to the wonderful staff. And I mean, not just the teachers, but our classified staff, everyone that works for the district make a difference in each student's life. And again, any student at any school site is happy where they're at, right? There's maybe other choices, but I feel as a district are doing a good thing. We could do better, and we look forward to, better outcomes. And again, when some of the parents were talking about their students' needs were not met at a specific school site, what we need to look at it was just maybe a few students that were not getting their needs met, but there's a lot of wonderful teachers that actually make a difference in students' lives at every school site.
Next item on the agenda.
Next item would be 13.7, recommendation adoption of resolution 38, approval of education code options for teaching assignments.
Yes, this is an annual request and will likely come back again in August. The state of California allows teachers that hold credentials already and are seasoned to teach one class outside of their designated credential area because of their expertise or previous history, and the combination of the fact that they've already attended, participated, and graduated from a credential program. So every year I bring sort of one-off scenarios, as you can see in the board memo, based on middle school, in most cases, scheduling. I'll also bring a list of those that might need consideration in August for electives too. That's on the horizon. So that's coming as well. Are there any questions about this?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee McAvoy.
Aye.
Trustee Wells.
Aye.
Trustee Lawson.
Aye.
Vice President Marquez.
Aye.
President Diaz-Loca.
Aye.
Item 14.1, report from board members and superintendent.
I can start. I did the last one of the year, the MTSS leadership team. It was a really nice recap of what was actually been done this year at the district level, and look ahead to how bringing that work to each of the sites next year. So I'm excited to see what's coming up in apropos of our discussion of what are we doing to elevate every site. We all went to the ribbon cutting ceremony at Taft. And then the promotions and graduations, which were awesome. The ones that I went to had amazing student speakers, really enthusiastic principals, and wonderful family there supporting, and community supporting all these kids as they promoted out of the 5th grade at Orion Alternative for the Mandarin immersion and the parent participation, and then graduated from Kennedy Middle School and from Hoover.
I'll just, I'll go because it's ditto everything Mike just said. I at the MTSS meeting, the Taft ribbon cutting was awesome. Beautiful building, really excited about that for the students and the staff. And yes, John, you talked about the staff room there. It's amazing. And then the graduations I attended, I went to Garfield, Henry Ford, Adelante Selby, and Kennedy. And just like Elisa said, like, they're just, everybody's so excited, and I love how different each one is. It really shows like the diversity of each of our schools, and how each of the graduations and commencements run, but it's really fun. So I enjoyed that very much.
You want me to go? Yeah, so I attended the Roosevelt, Northstar, and Clifford graduations this year. And I will say this is one of my favorite times of the year. And like you said, what's so interesting is they all have a different kind of culture and flavor of them. But one of the running themes is just how wonderful the student speakers are, the principal speeches, the staff speeches, whatever it is. And they all just clearly love their school so much, which is really always heartwarming to hear. And then I did have a meeting with Assembly Member Kevin Mullen, that was part of the CSBA sort of thing. And I advocated for all the various things that we've talked about. So we'll see. They're negotiating the budget right now, the governor and the legislature. And then I did meet with a parent of a special ed student, and Dr. Baker and I have been talking, so he'll be following up on that. And then let's see, I did go last night to the RCF board meeting, and I spoke about the bond just to give them an update and that sort of thing. And that's it. Oh, and then of course the Taft ribbon cutting, I just have to say, and I'm really looking forward to at some point, I think it'd be nice to us to do, probably won't be a bus tour because of COVID, but maybe we could do some more open houses, particularly in the summer when maybe the students aren't there, so we don't have as many safety issues. But so community members could go and see some of these different school sites and the updates that we've done. And I also think that'll get us, help us get excited for the new bond, where other schools will get some of these updates, right? Because it really is taking us to the 21st century and beyond sort of thing. Okay.
Well, I attended the budget meeting today with Cecilia and also the child nutrition services meeting. And I just want to say thank you to everybody on the staff, because this was another really hard year and you guys all pulled it off, as my colleagues have said, from the graduations, but going back into the classroom and serving the students and making it work. You guys all did an amazing job. So thank you very much.
As for me, I went to the McKinley, Taft, and Kennedy graduation, and of course, they were all wonderful. Also the ribbon cutting, child nutrition service committee, and the budget committee.
Mine are the same, with the exception of RCF. They introduced the new director last night. Yeah. And just, the graduations. I think one thing that stood out most for me was the student speakers all talked about having to leave March, of 2020, thinking it was going to be 2 weeks. And it was really hard to listen to some of them because of what they were going through, being at home virtually. And I know Sarah had a great speaker who, she was funny, but she really made her point from MIT, how that really had a large effect on her. So kudos to the students, who made it through this. And this is just to always think those mental health clinicians are really needed, that we have at each of our school sites now.
Okay, item 15.1, San Mateo County Office of Education review of RCSD second interim financial report for 2021-22.
Are there any questions for Priscilla?
Okay. Any correspondence?
Just real quick.
Your computer?
Is your computer on? This technology.
I know what we're dealing with, trying to do hybrid, right? It's crazy. Okay, I think I'm good though. I'm so sorry. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Priscilla, who has been such a great CBO for us. And I see you online tonight with us. Thank you for being here as always. And I just really want to give a shout out to you and your team, because I know how hard you guys are all working. And I know we'll be hearing from you next week, right? But I just want to say that because we've had a lot of folks tonight on the call tonight.
Sorry. It's okay, no worries. Any correspondence besides email?
A lot of emails. Both about the kitchen and the Northstar.
Yeah.
Okay, 17.1, possible other business suggested items for future agendas. 18.1, changes to the board agenda schedule. Are there any?
No.
What time is next week's, is Wednesday's meeting? Is that,
We have a closed session.
Okay.
next week, I believe, right?
Yes, we have a closed session and I believe closed session's at 6 o'clock.
okay,
It's
thanks.
a special education item.
Okay, with that, 19.1. And I get a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Do I have to do a roll call?
Trustee,
Or-
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Maria.
Good to see you guys.